Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order. Our clerk will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I would ask for, as per usual, a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any contrary? None. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw number 2018 and number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, and Ms. Gurry, we have a couple.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We're adding recommendations from the Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting that was held April 14th, 2021, so they will be under Agenda Item 10, Consent Items. Transitional Emergency Housing Cowichan Model, we're adding the report with the same title under Agenda Item 12A. An additional late item that came in is delegations unrelated to council items 11A, Holden Southward. He is not attending this evening, so that is being removed from the agenda. And as well, Your Worship, I believe Councillor Martman has a motion for a late item, so she will need to move it as a motion to be added as a late item and then have a vote on that for it to be added as a late item. And it will be under, her late item will be under Agenda Item number 14, Notice of Motion. So, Councillor Martman, you have an item.
Thank you very much. A motion for approval of the agenda as amended.
Your Worship, before such a motion, could we have
Oh, yes.
Councillor Martman's motion to add her late item first?
Sorry. Councillor Martman.
You can just request to have a late item added under Notice of Motion regarding, I believe it's options for RV use in Nanaimo. So you're requesting to add a late item under Notice of Motion?
Yes, I am requesting to add a late item regarding a motion on RV accommodation.
So if that is seconded and then voted on?
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Opposed, Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
And so now, Your Worship, the agenda can be...
Just a matter of clarification, is that a notice of motion?
Yes.
It's a motion.
Yes, I'm sorry for clarification. I thought it was a notice of motion as well to go under notice of motion to then be discussed and voted on at the next council meeting. So you would like it under other business then as just a motion for this evening? Okay. Did anybody else need clarification on that when the vote was taken, or?
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, now I do. I understood it was a motion, and I voted against that. And if that is the case, then I will still vote against it. If it's a notice of motion, then I'll happily support it. So one more time, please.
Yes, Your Worship, if we could just redo the vote then so that clarification is now sought. So it will be a motion under other business, which is item number 15. So it'll be 15B should it go through. So it's a motion to be dealt with this evening.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question of order. Is there debate around this item? Like to have it on the agenda? I'm just trying to figure out the process.
Yes, so under 10.1 in the council procedure bylaw, late items. So late items that are not included on the addendum that are brought to the table this evening are to be voted on. So yes, you can discuss it. So after they've been moved and seconded, you can have a discussion on whether or not to add that late item to the agenda.
Okay, so has it been seconded?
Sorry,
Has
Councillor
it been
Brown?
moved and seconded? Yeah. Okay. My question then would be just, I'm curious about the urgency to have it added as a motion rather than a notice of motion. That's.
I'll speak to why. It was over a sense of urgency. And I know we have many things that are urgent, but this notice of motion in the notice of motion, it strictly directs staff. No, in this motion, it simply direct staff to ask for a report. And that's why I didn't do it as a notice of motion, because all these things take so much time, and it's to do with homelessness and RV accommodation, etc. And because it was asking for a staff report, I decided to put it forth as a motion to save us time versus a notice of motion. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
We've been clarified, thanks.
Okay. So just so we're absolutely clear, the motion is to add this as a motion to be debated tonight.
That is the way I understand it, Your Worship. So if successful, it will be the new 15B.
All those in favor? Councillors Bartman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Brown, and Bonner, and those opposed? Councillors Armstrong, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Turley, the motion passes.
Now you're on to the approval of the agenda as amended, Your Worship.
I was just going to say, now we can actually move to the approval of the agenda as amended. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. On to the mayor's report. Several items coming from the city, as we haven't had a council meeting for some time now. Beginning Monday, April the 19th, the City of Nanaimo Public Works staff and contractors will be cleaning out the city's inventory of stormwater catch basins. Starting in the Duke Point area, crews will work their way north on the east side to Dickinson Road and then back on the south side of the city to Cinnabar Valley. Obviously, there will be some disruptions, and we'd ask people to pay close attention to ensure safety of the workers engaged in this. And if you want what Donna Stennis refers to as interesting facts about the City of Nanaimo, we have 10,000 catch basins to be cleaned. The city is launching surveys regarding rental housing and short-term rentals. As Council is certainly aware, the city is seeking feedback from residents and property owners on proposed bylaw changes affecting the use of homes as short-term rentals. And the city is also providing an opportunity for renters and landlords to share their experience finding and maintaining homes for rent. Given that we are still in the midst of an acknowledged housing crisis, I would hope that citizens will take advantage of this opportunity to express themselves and ensure that the survey, in fact, produces good results and gives us a good understanding of what people feel and think in the City of Nanaimo. The next is the step-by-step building, advancing energy efficiency and new construction. We have adopted a new step code on March the 19th, the new energy step code rezoning policy. The policy flows from the city's BC Energy Step Code implementation strategy and supports greenhouse gas emissions reduction in alignment with Council's climate emergency declaration. This policy would come into effect on June the 29th, 2021. And for rezoning applications that lead to an increase in density or a change in use, design and construction of any future development on the property will need to reach one step above the required BC Energy Step Code standard. A progressive move in terms of our commitment around fighting climate change. We have called for also representatives for the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Port Authority. We're currently recruiting one representative to sit in the Nanaimo Port Authority Board of Directors. The current term is 3 years with an option to extend twice for a total of 9 years. And the deadline for submission for an application form is 4 p.m. on Friday, April the 30th. In addition, we're seeking members for Art and Public Spaces Working Group. Applications are available. The newly formed working group will consist of 5 individuals who will be appointed by City Council to serve as knowledgeable volunteers for a 2-year term, helping to advance the city's public art program. Applicants will be considered for their demonstrated knowledge and experience in the expanded field of public art and creative placemaking, and the deadline for those applications is Monday, May the 10th. Also, a further release around Clean BC, a new construction rebates program. For builders, Clean BC Better Homes new construction program is providing rebates of up to $15,000 for the construction of new high-performance electric homes. The program is open to builders constructing a new Part 9 single-family detached home, laneway homes, duplexes, triplexes, or townhomes. Builders can receive rebates for constructing homes with electric heat pumps or for building to upper step levels in the BC Energy Step Code using electric space and water heating equipment. Additional add-ons are available for those who work with an energy advisor and for homes with no fossil fuel usage at all. Anyone interested in connecting with a BC Hydro representative can attend the April 20th Ask an Expert breakfast series beginning at 7:30 a.m. For details to register, please contact the Canadian Home Builders Association, Vancouver Island, located at chbavi.com. And on a final note, received a complaint the other week that the city's flags at both ends of the city, or in our lovely welcome entrances, weren't lowered in honor of the passing of Her Majesty the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. I confirmed back to that individual in accordance with policy that in fact the flag at City Hall was already lowered. The individual identified himself as a former member of the British Army, and it caused me to reflect that the reason the flags at City Hall were already lowered was because they had been lowered in light of the declaration of the Government of Canada that April the 19th would be Vimy Ridge Day, to honor and remember this battle of 1917, which everyone knows took place during the Great War, resulted in the deaths of 3,598 Canadian soldiers, with over 7,000 wounded. It was, in the parlance of military historians, when many regard that this nation came of age, not just as a colony, so to speak, or a former colony, rather, of the British Empire, but a true nation reflected in the bravery of those individuals, which got me to thinking about Prince Philip as well. And I'll lead to a message here and try not to dribble on too long. Prince Philip was nearly 100 years old. He was born after the Great War. For some of us around this council table, we remember well veterans of the Second World War, but even veterans of the First World War. Prince Philip, you could argue, enjoyed a life of privilege, but he was also of a generation that is largely gone. And that was the generation that, certainly in this country, suffered through 10 years of the Great Depression, a time when the hope for the future was taken from many people by the devastating effects of that depression, the lack of public health care, the lack of opportunities to advance. And then to finish it off, that same generation then faced the Second World War, 6 years of it. And some had faced it before that. The Mackenzie Papineau Battalion, composed of young socialists and communists. Indeed, two of those individuals are related to two fairly prominent individuals in our own community. Director Young of the Regional District of Nanaimo, her father was a member of the Mackenzie Papineau Battalion. Cheryl Tellier, who's been a long-serving member of the Coastal Community Credit Union Board, her father as well. Those people engaged in the fight against fascism, which took the lives of millions and millions of people. And so when I reflect on the fact that His Royal Highness Prince Philip served when he didn't have to, and in difficult times, it speaks to that generation, which is sometimes called the greatest generation. And the point of my ramble is this, and I think some of you have heard it. We are living through difficult times with COVID. We are all frustrated by the lack of social activity and connectivity and all of those things. But as some wag put it, our grandparents' generation was called to war. We're being asked to sit on the couch. And Prince Philip's generation went through the Depression, the Second World War. So tonight, my plea to all the good people of Nanaimo for the umpteenth time is please be kind and please be patient. And remember that how frustrating this may be, we have not spent a decade living without hope and in some form of misery. We have not had to sacrifice our lives in a direct sense, although healthcare workers in this community continue to work on the front lines. All those grocery store clerks, all those people who deliver services are all doing their best to help us get through this. So as much as I honor Prince Philip tonight, I honor him in the context of recognizing that his devotion to service that his generation took so seriously through difficult times is something we need to honor amongst those in our community and show our respect and honor to them by being kind and patient and continuing to do the best we can until such time as COVID is declared over and we can move on to happier, normal times. The next item on the agenda is presentations. It's the Vancouver Island University Memorandum of Understanding. Mr. Rudolph, I'm going to ask you to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll briefly speak and then turn it back to you. So, as we all know, the university here in the city is a very important part of this community, and it's an important partner with the city. We have partnership agreements with the Signamic First Nation, with the school board, with the Nanaimo Port Authority, and this is certainly an organization and a part of this community that the city needs to formalize its working relationship with. With Deb Saucier, the new president, coming to the city and the university early on in her tenure, she reached out to me and expressed a strong desire to build on a strong working relationship with us. And she's followed that up with several of her staff who have communicated with us and took it upon themselves to draft a working agreement such that we could embark on structured and organized working relationships. And we already do work with the university in a variety of ways, but I think there's a lot that we can do to build on that. This, at this stage, is primarily a staff-to-staff initiative because we don't have an elected board similar to the council and their senate and so forth, meet less frequently. But so this is exciting for us because it will allow us to go down and explore a path of opportunities, be it the economic development, research and development, development period, and look for those areas of common activities. So I'm pleased to be able to bring this, well, staff are bringing it forward tonight for your consideration. The president has been kind enough to attend as well via Zoom and is here to speak in addition to yourself. So it's on the table, and we're telling the world that we're anxious to work together and look forward to the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rudolph. And before I welcome Dr. Saucier, I just want to say that this is a very important agreement because it reflects the sense of cooperation that is strong in this community right now for all of us to pull together to make this an even better city than it already is. The Vancouver Island Vocational School and the Malaspina College and now the Vancouver Island University have been enormous contributors to the lives of thousands and thousands of our citizens and others who have moved away or others who've come here and moved back to their own countries. And so I am delighted to welcome their distinguished president. I can safely say that Vancouver Island University and its predecessors have never had bad leadership. Indeed, they've had excellent leadership. And Dr. Deborah Saucier certainly joins in that long list of very fine individuals who've provided real leadership for the most important educational institution in our community. Dr. Saucier, welcome via Zoom.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could give a few notes of acknowledgement. I would first like to say that I'm here today from the unceded territory of the Nanaimo First Nation. The support from me, my family, Nanaimo, and VIU, I'm very grateful for. Haidsiap Gasiem. I'd also like to thank the City of Nanaimo, Jake, and Your Worship for giving me this time to speak today. I'm so excited to be here today to formalize the long-standing partnership between Vancouver Island University and the City of Nanaimo. We really do believe that all we do is interconnected and that it's important to maintain close relationships, share ideas, and remain open to what we have to offer one another. I have a number of comments to make, but I'm cognizant that Your Worship may want to also make some comments as well.
I have hogged the mic enough tonight, President Saucier. I think two things. Firstly, we need to hear from you. And secondly, I'm sure what you will provide will be more interesting than what I might say. So You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. You know, I want to tell you a little bit about our new strategic plan and about some exciting things in front of both of us in light of this partnership. Throughout 2020, we spent the time engaging with VIU community members and community partners like the city to engage in conversation about VIU's strengths and what a new vision for our institution could be. These consultations made up our recently approved strategic plan, which we will introduce to the community this fall. But I'm here to give you a little bit of a preview. The title of our new plan is People, Place, and Potential. And if you think of people and potential as the trunk and branches of the tree of what we do, place is our roots and our focus on our relationship to place, that is Nanaimo and our other locations, and its cultural, social, economic, and environmental roots, make us us. As a regional university, we serve the local community. Our work doesn't just start and finish on the Hill. Our community partnerships are woven into the fabric of everything we do. We are a university built by and for the community. And with partners like the city, we are exploring some of the challenges and opportunities island communities are facing, which is why, at Your Worship's request, I took part in your task force on recovery and resilience. We will focus on being part of the solution and encouraging ways that our students and our employees can help in the economic recovery of our city. And using our talents, we will explore ways that the pandemic has affected society, including ways like tracking how the virus is impacting the housing crisis in the Cowichan Valley, Nanaimo, and Powell River. Researching how online learning has actually been going on and how well for the learners in our local school districts, and supporting frontline healthcare workers and experiencing mental health issues related to stressful situations. Our communities are active in solving the social, economic, and environmental challenges of our region, and VIU wants to be the partner of choice in supporting that crucial work. We're doing some good work already, including the work we do with the City Parks and Recreation Division, Nanaimo Division of Family Practice, and School District 68 to introduce grade 5 students to more active lifestyles. But we can eagerly and do eagerly seek out new opportunities to get VIU into the community to fill gaps and help grow the local economy. An economy that we believe will be noted as healthy and prosperous, one that is ensuring that community members can access the kind of training and educational programming they need from VIU. With our unique mandate to provide a unique combination of educational programs, we believe we can provide the kinds of training needed by community members. And in working with our partners, we can ensure that these opportunities are accessible for all. A key and central part to our new strategic plan, which, as I may have mentioned, will be rolled out in the fall. In closing, I would like to reiterate that education doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's informed and shaped by those who access it. I'm looking forward to the next steps, the conversations about where this partnership can take VIU and the city together, and how our partnerships can be broadened for the benefit of everyone in our region. Thank you, Your Worship. I respectfully thank you again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, President Saucier. I really do appreciate you taking the time tonight to speak to the city via the benefits of Zoom. One of those things that I won't miss if and when we can return to something resembling normal. And certainly in due course, we'll have an appropriate signing of some kind that we can't perform electronically tonight. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for the leadership of the university and your team up there. And as you know, the city did poach one of your senior team to become our manager of finance. So we certainly appreciate all you've done for the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship.
The next item, Mr. Harding, I'm going to ask you to introduce it, please.
Thank you, Worship. I will be brief. I just wanted to introduce Jen Houtley-Ferguson, who's our interim Executive Director of Tourism Nanaimo. And I know it may sound strange that on the eve of more travel restrictions that we're coming to council with a tourism update, but I think it's also important to know that a lot of work is still going on behind the scenes to assist the tourism sector in a number of areas, those companies and businesses that are struggling, of course, and then also planning a strategy as we come out of this pandemic, as we open up. So Jen's going to give you a little bit of background. Ms. Heltley is going to give a bit of a background. And again, this is also an interim model for those at home watching, as an interim tourism model, as we're working on a new service delivery model that we'll present to council later this year. So I really appreciate Ms. Heltley, who's taken this on to help us out through this time. And I think you'll find what she has to present very interesting. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome, and thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'll give you just a brief overview of where we are with tourism in Nanaimo. Some of this might be a little bit of a refresher, and in particular, do I have to turn this on? No, this is like Zoom, right? You're on mute. Okay, so I'm pushing. Hopefully it'll, here we go. I feel like I need to do a dance. Okay. We tried this earlier. And it was fun.
Don't be embarrassed, they won't even let it near me.
I'm a prof. Like, I use these all the time. I should be able to.
We'll just do we'll just do advance.
Yeah, you can. Do you want to just advance from there? That's totally okay. There are not that many slides, I promise.
I can advance.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, perfect. That's fine. Thank you. So I'll just give a very brief overview. Some of this may be a little bit familiar, and in particular, I'll just start with sort of setting the stage. So in terms of understanding how tourism in Nanaimo fits within the greater context of tourism in British Columbia. So we can go to the next slide, please, or slide 2. And one more. Thank you. So here you can see sort of how we fit in terms of the broader picture. So we have what's called Destination Canada. That is our national destination marketing organization. We have Destination British Columbia. You'll hear that term. I'm sure you've heard it many, many times in the last number of months. Of course, our colleagues at Tourism Vancouver Island, who are regionally focused. And then we are the Community Destination Marketing and Management Organization for Nanaimo. So we can advance. So where are we at? Today, you heard, obviously, that there were, or likely have heard, that there have been, I'll say, enhanced travel restrictions for British Columbia. The message really was not altogether different than what we've heard over the last number of weeks and number of months, and that is to stay within our household bubble, to not travel between communities. We call that inter-community travel, and that is exactly the message that we are sending and are continuing to send and will continue to send in the coming days and weeks. Having said that, it is important that we continue to recognize where we are so we can form a plan to go forward. So this is a little bit of a staggering statistic, if you will. The impact of COVID to the tourism industry is worse than 9/11, SARS, and the 2008-2009 economic recession combined. So previously to COVID, we compared everything to 9/11. Everything was compared to 9/11 because it took us 10 years to recover from the impacts of 9/11. If we go to the next slide, oh, sorry, I'll do this first. So tourism is hit first because we saw those international travel restrictions come in very quickly, particularly in British Columbia. That is the market that Nanaimo traditionally relies on. So we rely on that domestic Canadian market typically. We absolutely receive international visitors. Typically they are visiting other parts of British Columbia or other parts of Canada, and we become part of that addition. So as those international travel restrictions remain in place, tourism more broadly continues to be impacted. However, there is positive signs on the horizon, and that is that 80% of Canadians have indicated the intention to travel when restrictions are eased. I'm sure all of you are ready to get on a plane and go somewhere, right? Or perhaps even a ferry in this moment. What we're hoping is that if we can influence Canadians, and when I say we, I mean the collective tourism industry in Canada, if we can encourage Canadians to travel at home this year in 2021 and even looking ahead to 2022, that will accelerate recovery. And it will accelerate recovery in a significant way. It will help to make up that $19 billion shortfall, and sustain 150,000 plus jobs in the tourism sector. Okay, we can go to the next one. This is the staggering slide where you can see that tremendous drop-off. And where you start to see some of that recovery is in the ability to influence travelers to stay at home, to travel domestically. And we all know right now that that message is stay home. And a big part of the impact has been events. And so I want to just share with you the impact to the business event sector has been in the loss of 3,495 events. And while that does not sound like a tremendous number of events, we must remember that many of these events, including those at the Vancouver Convention Centre, for example, have tens of thousands of people that attend. And so that has resulted, just in 2020, in the loss of 1.39 million delegates to Canada. The vast majority of those are international delegates, and again, Canadians traveling across the country. We, again, in Nanaimo, are very often the beneficiary of folks traveling to Vancouver. They come here to extend their stay. They come here to explore British Columbia, and we are part of that travel process. And so that impact is $1.18 billion, and that is just in 2020. So this loss will be continued and sustained for many years. The event sector planning is often 2 to 6 years in the making, and so that process is that will continue to impact us for years to come. But of course, we're working to, our colleagues in Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal and the other big centers are working to recover some of those events. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide is interesting in that largely throughout, this is sort of the first quarter of this year, from January until the end of March, the trajectory, or the stays, if you will, on Vancouver Island largely mimic public health orders. So what we saw at the end of March was an increase in visitation, an increase in hotel stays, and that reflects spring break. So despite the warnings, despite the encouragement of folks not to travel, we may have still seen folks, we did see folks still come to Vancouver Island. So the other component that I want to just recognize here is that we have had a large number of visitors that came and chose to spend their time on Vancouver Island, including in Nanaimo, and have been here since the early fall, since September. They made the choice to not go south and instead are staying here in Nanaimo and other parts of Vancouver Island, because we do have that more temperate climate relative to, let's say, our colleagues in Alberta and in Saskatchewan. We do continue, as I said earlier, to convey the message of intercommunity travel is not recommended at this time. Today, we saw the announcement of enhanced measures, and what that looks like is a reduction in BC Ferry sailings. That includes the cancellation of reservations that include RVs or trailers, so that will limit visitors coming to Vancouver Island for a leisure purpose and what would be deemed to be non-essential. And there will be no increases in sailings. Our accommodation partners have also been asked to cancel reservations for folks that live outside of their health authority. So those impacts will continue to mount. But there really is some good news on the horizon. If we can advance the slide, please. So part of my job, I'll say, as the interim person here in Nanaimo, is balancing and wanting to make visitors feel welcome, but also respecting where we are in this pandemic and respecting that some communities and some people may not be ready to receive visitors at this time, even from other parts of Canada or even from other parts of the island. Public health measures have indicated, as we've said, to stay within your community. Right now, it's don't leave your neighborhood. We've gone so far as to say that. But it is important that when we are ready to welcome visitors, that our residents are ready to receive visitors, and that we make people feel welcome, because that is part of what they take away. That's part of the charm of Nanaimo is meeting the folks that live here, eating in our restaurants, chatting with people on the waterfront. That is part of the experience, and we recognize that we have a responsibility in that. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So part of that is conveying expectations of residents. So what does that look like? What does the know before you go look like? If you're going to come here this summer, wear a mask. What's open? Where can you go safely? Where maybe can you not go? What things may not be open or may not be open to visitors? We also are encouraging our operators to share their COVID safety plans, and we will share those with our partners at Destination British Columbia that again help amplify our message in a broader way. We will continue to share that intercommunity travel at this time is not recommended. And of course, the health and safety of the tourism industry and our residents and continues to be a top priority for us. If we can go to the next slide, please. So, the hyperlocal focus. This has been something we've been focused on now for several months, and today was, I feel like it was reinforced by Dr. Henry's orders. So we can go to the next slide. One of the things that came down about 2 weeks ago was Destination Canada, so our national destination marketing organization, identifying that they will begin marketing for the first time in international markets starting in May. And that, to me, was a positive indication that they remain hopeful, as do we, that there will be a summer, that there will be a tourism season this summer. It may look a little different. It may look like we don't have international visitors, but I remain hopeful that we will be able to welcome British Columbians to the island and to Nanaimo this summer. As part of that, I am getting ready, and we are getting ready from a tourism perspective to initiate tourism marketing plans. And at this point, at the direction of Destination BC, all of our marketing plans are on hold. We certainly are continuing on social media to share travel inspiration, trip planning ideas. We remain open to questions at the visitor center, and people contacting us via email and, of course, directly through social. So there's cautious optimism this summer. One of the things that we have identified, again, is the hard-hit food and beverage sector. So you may have noticed within our partnership with Black Press, we have that stay local, support local. That is sort of our mantra at the moment, and that is, just because we can't welcome folks from outside of our community, we can still support within our community. And we strongly believe that the food and beverage sector and other parts of the tourism industry, our attractions, our arts and culture venues like the Port Theatre, the museum, et cetera, there's still different ways that we can stay together and support, and we can stay connected to our community. So here are just a few examples, and you can go ahead and slide through these. So this was a recent feature as well, Nanaimo's Best Hikes. The next is Cedar Yellow Point. That was the feature last week. So again, just trying to give people some different ideas. You can go to the next slide, please. Give people some different ideas of things that they can do with their family. They can get out and support local, see local attractions. And so there is still there's still a place for getting out and exploring. And my hope is that if people get these ideas and they go maybe to a place they haven't seen before, that they're going to be able to share that with friends and family when the time comes. When the time comes to welcome people back to Nanaimo, we'll be able to do that. So some of the key initiatives, of course, Mr. Harding mentioned the Tourism Working Group and working on the governance and a new service delivery model for tourism in Nanaimo. We are ready to launch a We Have Layers campaign. We will go ahead with that website launch, albeit not in a flashy kind of advertising kind of way, but we will press go on that in the next couple of weeks. Of course, recovery marketing plans are underway and have been revised and re-revised as things are needed. And that stay local, support local message continues to be a big part of what we do. And we have additional plans working in collaboration with our friends at the Chamber and, of course, the Nanaimo Hospitality Association, again, to share and amplify that local message. The next two slides are just some examples of a sneak peek, if you will, of the We Have Layers campaign. And the idea is that there's more to Nanaimo than you think, or maybe that you have experienced in the past, that we have lots of different things to see and do. So we can go ahead and advance the slides, the next two. So just a couple of examples here and one more, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your enthusiasm and your work in what has to be a pretty challenging time for someone working in the tourism industry to promote it. Very challenging. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really curious about how the local economy can support our food and beverage industry. And do you have any sense of what the tourism, what that brings in compared to what the local economy can drive? Like, can we keep them afloat?
In terms of the food and beverage sector,
Yeah.
Can we keep them afloat? I think it would be difficult for me to quantify that specifically. I don't necessarily have that data. I'm happy to go back and look at it. I think there are folks who are being impacted every day in a variety of ways, and so I think the message here has to be those that can, please help if you can. And sometimes that just we're looking at a bit of a promo, patios and pickup. And the idea being, if you have the opportunity to go and sit on a patio and have, a cold beverage, you can do that. If you can go to your local coffee shop and sit on the patio and have a coffee physically distant from a friend, you can do that. It doesn't have to be, a big dinner for your entire family that you're picking up at the restaurant. So, I think people can find different ways to provide support. Can the community sustain that sector on its own? I'd have to get back to you on that. I have to crunch the numbers.
I think that's okay. I do want to say I appreciate the marketing, the We Have Layers. I quite like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding, thank you. The next are committee minutes. They're just for receipt. No motion required. Then a motion for adoption of consent items. And Councillor Brown, you wish to withdraw 10A6.
Yes, Your Worship, if we could have a motion for the adoption of the consent items and seconded, and then we'll remove and vote on them separately. So could we have a motion for the adoption of all of them at once, and then?
All of them at once? Move,
Yes,
Councillor.
if you have it moved and seconded to vote on all of them, and then Sarah Adamley will pull out the one that Councillor Brown wishes to move out, and then it doesn't require a subsequent vote.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Martman. And Councillor Brown has requested the removal of 10A6. Correct? And now you want us to vote on that, or have a vote on
You
the...
would vote on all but 6, and then you'll vote on 6 separately.
All right.
So
We're going-
everything right now except for
Voting
10A6.
Voting on all but 6. All those in favor of the consent items? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. And on item 10A6, all those in favor? You wish to speak to it?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My intention isn't to redebate this, but I do want to acknowledge why I've pulled it out. I'm a firm believer you get the community that you build, and I've been to communities with fencing, walls, security guards, security cameras, and none of those communities get rid of those things by building more of them. So I want to firmly express my opposition to this, as I believe it is a regressive vision, and also more importantly, a regressive approach for solving the unfortunate circumstance of so many unsheltered individuals in our downtown and the impact it is having on the neighborhood and business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Worship. I've been thinking about this decision the last few days. I do struggle with it in the sense that there isn't really any solutions for these folks that are out there, and we are investing in basically, in a way, criminalizing homelessness and asking people to move from place to place. And I understand that there's a lot of very challenging situations with folks that have some mental health challenges and also in the midst of addiction, and there's crime associated with that, and it's taken its toll on businesses and individuals in the downtown. And so we're stuck at a crossroads of basically, in the vacuum of much larger effort needed from the provincial government, how to manage this situation. And I do understand that people do need to feel safe in their downtown. And we also need to provide a meaningful long-term solution to this. So I think that there was a motion with this to provide a more long-term financial, a long-term community safety strategy. I'm not convinced that this $400,000 for community security will be helpful, and so I think that this motion needs to be discussed in the context of a larger plan around this with our upcoming systems planning organization. And so I'd like to move to defer this decision to a future date after we discuss more housing options.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded. Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak further to it?
I think this provides a little bit more time for a discussion around this matter, and so that something can be brought forward around downtown safety in the context of a more thought-out plan, and also in the context of the other measures that we're going to do to mitigate sort of the homelessness and mental health crisis.
Does anyone wish to speak to the deferral? I have Councillor Armstrong first.
I'm opposed to the deferral. I think there was lots of discussion on this previous. This is just, we all recognize this is just a stopgap measure, and we have funded from the special reserves to do the public safety plan. So I think that's what's going to look after that. So I don't think this needs to be deferred. This is the same council that had no issues giving $176,000 to private businesses up at the Old City Quarter. So I really struggle that the Old City Business Quarter is good enough, but the downtown businesses aren't. So for those reasons, I'm going to oppose the deferral and continue to support the initiative. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the deferral, I'm curious, and I'm looking at Ms. Gurry just procedurally, if that is in fact appropriate. We have voted on this. We've passed this motion at council, at committee at least. This to me indicates a path that I'm not familiar with. It's not a reconsideration per se, but basically we're being asked to do that by this deferral.
So thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Thorpe. It is procedurally appropriate, or it can be done at this point, because Finance and Audit did approve these recommendations and you voted on it as a Finance and Audit Committee. These motions are now at Council for final approval, so Council approves these motions that the committee recommended you approve. So at this time, you could defer. It is procedurally okay to defer it, as Councillor Gasbrock has suggested, though there could be budget implications, and that's the part I'm not sure about. The deferral is in order, is what I'm saying. It can be done right now because it'll have to come back to a council meeting, however, to be discussed.
Thank you. If I may, Your Worship, I appreciate that, and I understand what you're saying. Then my second question would be this: if this is a motion to defer, that means that we are sending this somewhere else. Where would that be, and when would that be?
So from the deferral motion, from what I've received, and Council Gesselbrock may be able to provide some clarity, is it would be deferred until such time as there are further discussions on housing alternatives, on temporary housing alternatives. There was no specified meeting type and or date.
Thank you, and I apologize. It is a deferral, not a referral, which is slightly different. In any case, I feel we have debated this, and I would like to see it move forward, and I'll give my reasons if there is further debate. Thank you.
Councillor Markman, did you wish to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I am not for the deferral. I understand that for some people, they think that just adding security and pushing our people that are on the streets and without homes, pushing them around, and I get that. And yes, I would like to do something about that as well. But right now we have a downtown that is really struggling. And we're getting sent photos that are not that pleasant, that I really think we need a little bit of extra eyes on the street right now, just for some safety and to have people with our great weather. If you can feel safe coming downtown, talk about promoting locally. This is what we need right now. And then I hope that we get more action, but part of the reason I put forward a motion for later on tonight is about timing and about how long everything takes. And I don't want to defer helping our downtown any longer than we have to, so I'm against the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Yeah, I apologize, Your Worship. I will add a comment, because if we go ahead on the motion to defer, I might not get the chance to speak again. So this is, as we debated earlier at the committee level, this is not about an attempt to help or solve the problem of homelessness or street people or those unfortunate who are living in the downtown area, possibly part of the time on the street. That's not the intent of this. That's another area that we're working on. This motion is intended to provide some support to the downtown businesses and to the people in our city who visit the downtown and right now, quite frankly, do not feel very safe. And this is a signal to our business community and to our taxpayers in general that we are interested in helping them as well as those people who are struggling on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. I too will not support a deferral of this. This is not a motion that is going to assist in any way, shape, or form to deal with the mental health, addictions, and acquired brain injury crisis that afflicts far too many of the people who live in our streets. This is simply and purely about public safety until such time as the province and the federal government have provided the kind of housing, complex care, and supports that are necessary to deal with the most obvious social problem afflicting every community of any size in this country. With great respect, I am not prepared to defer something when in fact the expenditures of these funds, which are not as substantial in comparison to the problem that we face in our streets with open lawlessness and crime, with attempted arsons that we have been reported to us, given the significant reporting from Acting Superintendent Fletcher, Inspector Fletcher, our own bylaw staff and others, it ill behooves us to turn to the downtown, as Councillor Armstrong has pointed out so succinctly, and say, well, you're not the old city quarter and we're not going to give you the support that we gave. This is a time to act. It is not a remedy, as I say, for the homelessness problem, and more particularly as I emphasize again and over again, the mental health, addictions, and acquired brain injury crisis. But it is the best that we can do within our jurisdiction and our resources. So I will be voting against the referral. I see no other speakers. All those in favor of the deferral. Councillors Gesselbrock, and that's it. All those opposed? Everyone else. No, Councillor Brown, thank you. Now, we're going to vote on the main motion, which is item 10.6c, the downtown security. Unless there's further speakers, all those in favor and contrary, Councillors Gesselbrock, Brown, and Bonner. Opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Southward has withdrawn as a delegation. The next is reports, and that's the Transitional Emergency Housing Cowichan Model. Mr. Lindsay, and I suspect Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Happy to be here this evening and present staff's report on the Transitional Emergency Housing Cowichan Model it's described. As Council is aware, we had a motion from yourselves early in February asking for us to look at options for implementing temporary emergency accommodation program and what was described as being similar to the Cowichan housing model, and specifically looking for capital and operating costs of 2 to 3 sites, opportunities for community collaboration, and comment from agencies and departments. And Your Worship, this info report you have on your agenda this evening is a response to that motion. I'm not going to go over the details of the report in its entirety, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of points. And as you mentioned, Ms. Bhopal Singh and Mr. Corson are here with me this evening, and we're certainly happy to take questions afterwards. Your Worship, on the first question in the motion about the operating and capital costs, in terms of setting up one of these sites, there's a table in the report which gives you an idea on the range of capital costs with establishing approximately a 12-unit temporary site. You'll see there's some range depending on the level of service provided, with approximately $106,000 being at what I would most closely describe as being the Cowichan model, up to almost $500,000, $455,000 for setting up the capital with a site that actually had CSA approved units. And we simply provide that range for Council's information. The one thing I would note, Your Worship, on the capital side, we've put here forward numbers most closely related to the project in Duncan, and that is that it was a site that was level, finished, paved parking lot. the capital cost with establishing one of these sites is going to vary widely depending on the nature of the property. So if you have a property that's flat and parking lot, has access to services, obviously cheaper. If it's a site that's going to require grading, servicing extensions, all of those could add considerably to the cost. So the numbers provided here are based on an assumption of a relatively flat, easy, accessible property. On the operating side, Your Worship, you can see the numbers in the table here. Again, a range of $176,000 to $287,000 a year. And these are, I want to be clear, these are per site numbers that we're talking about. In the report, we also identify that that the Cowichan model indicated to us about approximately $250,000 per site per year, and that's based on a model that includes a nighttime security. So again, a range depending on the level of service that's provided to the site. Your Worship, the other part of the motion was asking for comment from partners, and we have letters that have been attached to the report, including letters from our fire chief, from our acting superintendent, Superintendent Fletcher, who's here, as you mentioned this evening. Also responses from Island Health and BC Housing. And I'm not, Your Worship, going to paraphrase their responses. They're attached in their entirety to your report for your information. Other than noting in the BC Housing response, they did indicate that they'd be open to funding part of the operating costs of such a program. Other partners, we reached out to Nanaimo Homeless Coalition, and their response is also attached. Staff also reached out to operators in the community to ask for feedback and specifically if they had capacity to support such an operation. At the time that we drafted the report, we had no formal responses from any operator indicating that they had the ability to provide service. I had one conversation, a verbal conversation with one operator who said they may potentially have that capacity, but that as of this evening, they haven't provided us anything in writing. And Your Worship, this is a staff report, but at the end, I've added a general manager's comment, which is a bit unusual, but we thought it was important to note that certainly running a program like that is not in, it's not in the current staff work plan for this year. And certainly there's not the skill set or capacity in staff to actually manage day to day, manage these sites. But if we expect the council went ahead with this, we would expect that staff would be involved in things like drafting and reviewing the RFP that would have to go out in search of an operator, identifying sites and setting up the program. So it'd be a significant amount of work for this. And Your Worship, I think it's important to note that our certainly from my perspective, staff's capacity is at its are fully dedicated, I guess, right now, I would say, to a number of projects, and I've listed them here in the report, and this isn't certainly not the entirety, but there's some major projects, including the implementation of the current MOU we have with BC Housing. We have the first project, which is just breaking ground of those 7 sites, those 4 supportive housing projects, regular weekly work that's continuing on that. You've set us on the task of working with the transition group for the implementation of the Health and Housing Action Plan. As we've talked about here before, the idea of a navigation center landing, and then Nanaimo staff continue to work with BC Housing on that project. And then the existing sites we have, there's ongoing community engagement. For example, the community advisory committees that we meet with monthly around the 2 modular sites, and we'd expect as these new sites come on board as part of the MOU, staff will be participating in those. I guess, Your Worship, that's a long-winded way of saying that staff's capacity is, in my opinion, stretched right now. And if council wanted to proceed with a program like this, we would have to look at how we were possibly going to modify our work plan, fit that in, and if necessary, defer some of this other work that staff are currently underway with. As I mentioned, I have staff here with me this evening, and certainly happy to take any specific questions to the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Armstrong.
Oh, thank you. I was just noting, but I don't see Chief Doyle's here, just the concern raised by the fire department about liability. And also, I also wanted to comment on the concerns raised by our Inspector Fletcher that they just don't have the resources to look after an additional, which is the additional units, you know, depending on who's in there. I think these are big issues. I don't think we have the staff capacity right now, as stated by Mr. Lindsay, with all the other projects we have ongoing. We've got 4 new sites coming up, which are taking staff's time. We haven't even been able to locate a site for a navigation center, which is concerning. So if we can't do that, how are we going to take on these additionals? And I also noted the cost of $287, and that's only for 12 people. So very concerned about that. I think it's no different than what we talked about with security. It's a temporary fix. It's going to not really help anything. And I'm very concerned that even though they say they're temporary, that they will become permanent based on different information I've read and reviewed. So I'm very concerned. Originally, I was supportive of this, but I don't think now is the time that we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Ms. Paul-Singer, Mr. Corson. The facility in Duncan, is it open now? And if so, what was the time frame to set it up? And has it resulted in any neighborhood issues? And I got 2 more questions, so bear with me. And are the hardest to house involved in being in that facility? And yeah, basically, you can tie it in with that. What is the uptake being? In other words, we've been told in the past that there are certain homeless people that don't want to be in a facility, and I don't know no idea what the percentage is of the total homeless people that would fall into that category. But yeah, I'm more concerned about. In my business career, I never wanted to be first in line. I wanted to be second or third so I could learn from the others' mistakes. So I'd kind of like to know what the mistakes are on this one. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start and I'll ask Ms. Paul-Singer or Mr. Corson to jump in. I certainly, and I want to be careful about commenting about something that's going on in another jurisdiction and qualifying with based on what we understand the program right now. So certainly the program's up and running, and our understanding is it's sites that transitioned from tent sites to the introduction of these temporary cabins. The model is intended to be, as we understand it, transitional housing, that this is a temporary housing opportunity until such time as there's permanent housing projects. There is a permanent supportive housing project that's coming online in Duncan itself, I believe. And I think the intent is that these people would eventually move to more permanent housing. So we know that BC Housing has confirmed to us that they did support funding for, it was originally expiring in this spring, if I recall correctly, and then I think they've extended it for a few months, but the intent was that it's temporary. In terms of the questions about neighborhood impacts or feedback, I'm sorry, I don't have the answers to that.
Mr. Corson.
Sorry, Your Worship, through to Councillor Turley. There was a question about the residence in which people were living in the Duncan model, and our understanding is that they've put the easiest to house in those locations, so the people that are most compliant. The model there's no daytime security. It's just a security person at night, likely more for the protection of the residents. So it's not the hardest to house, it's the kind of what we call probably the low-hanging fruit.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I have a motion related to this item. Curious if we take it now or in new business.
Ms. Gurry, I would think the appropriate time is now if Councillor Gesselbrock wants to move it.
Yes, Your Worship, it is related to this agenda item, so now would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Worship. I'd like to move that a request for proposal be developed for the management and operation of 2 temporary emergency shelter sites provided by the city based on the couch and shelter model to shelter up to 24 people who are awaiting placement in BC Housing dwelling units. That a report be prepared for council that identifies city properties available to accommodate the 2 emergency shelter sites on a temporary basis, and that the initiative and associated costs be funded for 1 year from the Housing Legacy Reserve.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Martman. Do you wish to speak further, Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, we're in an extreme homelessness, mental health, and addictions crisis. People are living in subhuman conditions, and the consequences on them and the entire community is unacceptable. The problem is worsening for many reasons outside of the control of our city. On the current trajectory, we're headed for another tent city, and that will only worsen the conditions for everyone. We at the city are mobilizing a much more sustained long-term approach to addressing our homelessness crisis with our systems planning organization. On top of the current housing projects in partnership with BC Housing, we still need a much greater level of coordinated action from the province to make any real progress. Regardless, in the interim, we at the city have no choice but to do everything in our capacity to work with all willing partners to address this crisis with solutions that will work for both individuals at need and for the wider community. Small-scale temporary shelters provide up to 12 10-by-10 living units that are supported 24/7. These sites have been a proven model in Duncan to provide cost-effective shelter for people at a manageable scale to limit any disturbances. We do not have the capacity at the city to manage these sites on our own. By issuing a request for proposal to manage a modest 2 sites, the city shows that we're serious about funding urgently needed solutions, and we'll see what organizations are ready to immediately manage these sites. Once rolling, we can see for ourselves the effectiveness of this as a temporary emergency intervention and can scale up appropriately at a rate that the community can manage sustainably. BC Housing has indicated a willingness to help with funding, and there's also federal money available for such initiatives as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to talk to the issue of capacity, if I may. Did have a conversation with one of the agencies that might possibly be interested in doing this work today. And not-for-profit agencies are very similar to the city in that everybody's doing their job and they're doing it full-time and they're quite busy working. Nobody's sitting around twiddling their thumbs, basically. So the question of capacity, if I were to ask Mr. Sims, can you start building the dam next week? He would say, no, we do not have the capacity or the resources to do that. The same is with the not-for-profits in that, as of right now, they do not have the employees or the capacity to start one of these things up next week. But that doesn't mean that given the right resources, they would build their capacity, which they've all said to us numerous times, to be able to run one of these things when it's ready to be opened. So I think that is the question here is, right now, there's no capacity, but if we provide the proper resources, the agencies that would be, say, if they were to be successful for this RFP, would then have the opportunity to build the capacity they need to run it. So I'm quite confident that the capacity exists when it's needed, if the right resources are allocated to that. And I know where this conversation, some folks on this conversation is, this is not in our lane, but the city actually spends money and has spent money in the past on shelters. So I view this as definitely something that we've done in the past. This is not going to be a solution. We literally have 500 plus people living on the streets. We're talking about 24. But this will, if it's successful, then we can then scale it up. And right now, I think we need to start trying some things that might be successful. And waiting around for the province to come in and rescue us, they've already committed millions and millions of dollars to this city. I think this is a time that we as council need to say, if we're going to do the work that we need to do and help mitigate the issue of homelessness in our city, we need to start providing shelter to get people off the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I will support this motion because it's about putting out a request for proposal. And in that request for proposal, we're asking for another organization to see if they have the capacity, and I'm with Councillor Bonner, that if everything comes together and we were looking at going down this route, that this is something that other agencies will have the capacity or the funding to do, that they're receiving funding. Nanaimo Homeless Coalition gets federal funding to help with the Canada's Reaching Home program. These other organizations have said, yes, they are willing to look at doing this. So I think if with this motion, putting forward the request for a proposal, who knows? Maybe nobody will even respond to it. In that case, our question is answered. But if we don't at least try, we have to start somewhere, and we're going to have to do a multitude of things along with the BC Housing to help address what is happening in our city and all the cities across this country, but we're concerned with Nanaimo. And so I support this motion to see what we can do within our city. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I can't support this at this time for the simple fact we do not have staff capacity, which we heard from Mr. Lindsay. VHA does not have staff capacity, which they've stated in their thing, so they cannot provide support. So who's going to do that? Who's going to provide the food? Who's going to provide the sanitation? We're already at a max with our sanitation staff. Are we going to hire more staff? Who's going to do the maintenance? All of this is done. And I also think we're going to have to make some decisions on which projects do we take away from Mr. Lindsay's shop because they can't do it. We've heard that from them. We can't keep piling project after project after project on them because none get done and we don't have the capacity. And my biggest concern is VHA stating they don't have the capacity and it's right in their letter to provide supports. So what are we going to do with that? Because everybody that's going to go in there needs supports. My other big issue is that our zoning does not support those. So if we're going to do that, if we're going to have to either change our zoning bylaw or go against our own bylaw, which to me is totally not correct. You know, we enforce our bylaws on other people, but we won't on ourselves. So I really don't think we can do this right now. I would like to see our staff's efforts go into the navigation center, which they've been working on for quite some period of time, which is going to look after 60 people, not 12. So for me, I think we've got to start making some priorities because they just can't do it all. Either that or we sit down and say, okay, we're going to hire 5 more people. And let's not forget that our staff aren't social planners. We have only 2. Thank you. So I just won't support it this time.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have a quick question through to staff. So just crunching the numbers, if we support this, that's about just over a $700,000 investment for one-time costs for 2 sites based on the approximate funding provided. If that is to come from the Housing Legacy Reserve, what is our availability with that reserve to say just purchase a few properties that we then give to BC Housing to build permanent housing? Can we use the reserve for that purpose, and is that something we would pursue?
Sorry, Worship. So if I understand the question, can you use your Housing Legacy Reserve to buy property that we could then enter into agreements with BC Housing? And the short answer is yes. And I'm trying to think if we've used it for that purpose recently, but it's certainly been an option that we've explored in the past. So yes, there's council has flexibility around how you use that. So in the past, I know we've used it to, I think Councillor Bonner already mentioned this evening, to supplement shelter service. We've used it for works and services on projects. I can't think off the top of my head of a specific land project, but it's certainly something that would fit within the scope of that reserve.
And would staff require a motion to, like, if council said, please go out and find 3 sites that we could say to BC Housing, here are sites for you? Would that, or is that something we're just constantly exploring in terms of real estate?
Your Worship, I think I say there's 2 different things there. Yes, we're constantly exploring options on looking for sites. Off the corner of Mr. Corson's desk, amongst other things, is one thing that he does. But if it was specifically council wanted us to go actively purchase property, I think that would require a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking to the motion which staff and council just heard about this afternoon, I have a number of real concerns about this. And first of all, I'll start with the fact that the original staff request was to bring us back information on the Cowichan or Duncan model, which they've done in a fairly fulsome manner. And I note that in the conclusion of that report, it states If council wishes, or should wish, to proceed further with implementing an emergency housing project similar to the Cowichan model, they may request staff bring forward a second report for options for consideration, including potential locations. I might be persuaded to support a motion along those lines, although I would still have some hesitation, but I could probably be persuaded. We need a lot more information, and to me, the motion that's on the floor is really hugely premature to talk about issuing a request for proposal when we haven't even heard options on possible sites, land usage, zoning, building bylaws, funding sources. The Cowichan model, my understanding is BC Housing is paying $180,000 per month for that model. Well, I haven't heard them say they'll do that for us. We have a number of irons in the fire for supportive housing and the Navigation Center, and staff are stretched to work with our partners to bring those on stream, and I support those. But this is sending us off in another direction, and I do hear the concerns of staff capacity, and it's not in our work plan. So I'm not convinced that we have the information we need to proceed on this road until I hear a lot more details from staff. I also have concerns over the city's risk management if we proceeded on this and potential sources of liability. So I have a lot of questions that I feel need to be answered before I can support jumping into a request for proposal for a model that we haven't even heard from staff how, where, when, and if it could be supported. So a lot of questions from me, a lot of concerns from me, and I just don't see that this is appropriate at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons for second time. I'm going to start at the end of the report to Council tonight. It begins, there is no capacity nor the required skill set within our organization to manage temporary housing sites. And then concludes, present priorities include, but are not limited to, implementation of the MOU with BC Housing, 7 sites, the support of the Transition Working Group as part of the implementation of the Health and Housing Action Plan, working with our partners to establish a navigation center, ongoing community engagement with respect to existing and proposed housing facilities, and identification of additional permanent housing sites. What we know so far is that we don't have a site for navigation center, which is a unique proposal supported by the province, for which I think I can use without exaggerating. The money is guaranteed because it is part of a larger scheme. I'm not suggesting that any councillor at this table, and I want to be very clear about this, I'm not suggesting any councillor at this table is engaging in what is sarcastically known as virtue signaling. However, I think it has the appearance of virtue signaling. And by that, I simply mean this. Councillor Gesselbrock said, shows were serious. Councillor Bonner, we're waiting for the province to rescue us. Councillor Martman, if we don't at least try. We have already met, and this is a repetition of arguments that were made previously, we have already met with reasonable success with the province in terms of commitment to housing. We know from the minister's mandate letters there is a commitment and recognition of the complex cases. We know from reports from our staff, from the RCMP, from bylaws, from everybody, we face incredible challenges in our streets. Staff don't come forward and ask for $400,000 for security because they think it's a waste of time or silly or wish to spend those monies unnecessarily. The reality of this is that the people who are occupying the present, we'll call it complex, in Duncan, are identified not as the difficult cases. We have the promise of a navigation center that we don't have. We have the promise of other units. I just do not see this as a valuable use of money, but more importantly, I accept what staff have said to us tonight. And if I accept that, then anything we do with this motion means that it will detract from their already overburdened list of to-dos in their attempts to try and secure sites for permanent housing and take all those and address all the priorities which we as council have previously addressed and spoken to, and which they have identified, and which the community identifies, which BC Housing identifies, which the provincial government arguably identifies. So no, I'm not prepared to support this. For me, I appreciate Councillor Bonner's comments about an agency speaking to him and maybe they build capacity, all those things. I get that. But I must say, when you send out 10 requests to the various agencies in our community that might be able to undertake this kind of work, and there is no response apart from one conversation, I appreciate the response will be, well, that's because it wasn't specific enough, or it was too general, or why would they respond? My response to that is, because I'm anticipating that argument and comment, is if there was any significant interest or ability on their parts to do so, they would have naturally responded as anyone would in that situation and said, I'm sorry, but I can't respond to your proposal because it's not specific enough. Here are my list of questions that give me the parameters that will allow my organization to make a decision. We didn't even get that. So why would we now spend time sending out a request for a proposal to agencies that may well come back with that response, and we'll spend more staff time responding to that because we can't say for sure because we don't have sites, they don't have the staff or the capacity. I'm simply not prepared to expend energy on something which I do not believe will result in any improvement in our situation and will in fact detract from the Herculean efforts of staff now trying to work with the Ministry of Housing under Mr. Eby's leadership, with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, with BC Housing and other agencies, all trying to implement the recommendations of the Health and Housing Task Force. I'm simply not prepared to support that. Councillor Hemmens, Councillor Gesselbrock, Hemmens, and then Martin.
Thank you, Worship. It boggles my mind walking downtown, seeing the amount of people that are on the streets. I saw one person walking on the seawall with all their stuff splattered all over, cutting themselves. And that person could really use a place to just be able to like park safely, keep all their stuff inside, and maybe have a hope in heck to get help. If we don't have the resources to like do something about this, it is getting worse out there. And if we're doing all this work with the province and still we're seeing the numbers increase and increase and increase, I think it's a really high sign that we got to start more urgently and more seriously diverting the resources and looking at what we're doing as a city and how we're allocating our energy. And this is a very concrete action that we can do. It's been done on a very short notice in Duncan. We actually have word that we have individuals that were part of that project moving to this community in short order to do it. I think that if we get on and write an RFP, we can execute this pretty quickly on a pretty small scale and demonstrate maybe a little bit of hope that we can mitigate the tidal wave of people that are out on the streets being pushed further into the bush where the risk of forest fires, summers come, is high. I don't see any argument by doing nothing that we're putting ourselves at more risk than we absolutely are now. And I think that this can be a demonstrable win in a sea of losses. And I get that our staff is completely strapped, working on all the different fronts. And I think that is pause for reflect for council that potentially we maybe didn't allocate our staff resources where we needed to do it. And that's something for me to sit back and think about in terms of like a social planner, because I do get that we are strapped. However, you know, with the energy that can be put in this for an RFP, we can put it out there and we might not get anybody to take it, and that's fine. But at least we can say we've tried and it's a concrete action that could produce some results and maybe a model that we can further mitigate, you know, what we're up against. Because I can tell you we're going to be spending a lot more resources dealing with a tent city than we'd be spending with this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question of staff and then just some general thoughts. So the motion is a request or an RFP be developed and then a staff report be prepared with potential locations. Would those happen in tandem from the staff side? So, yeah, let's start there.
Thank you, to Your Worship. Certainly those could happen in tandem. I think if you're asking my recommendation, it would probably be that we take the first step of identifying the locations, because as I mentioned earlier, the capital costs we put in front of you are based on a hypothetical model. And once we know exactly where those sites were and the amount of work that was required, we could give you a better estimate of what the actual startup cost would be of each of those sites. There might be a two-step process. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and it's probably because I mentioned in my report the RFP, but because you're more in, if I'm listening to council this evening, you're more in this exploratory phase, probably something more like an RFI or like a request for interest would be more appropriate than an RFP, which means we're entering into a contract for somebody to provide a service. You're exploring interest in responding to that service. So there's just one thing on the motion that I might, if council proceed with that motion, I might ask that you just tweak that to remove RFP in exchange for RFI.
So if we do that exchange and we go for RFI, then what we would be doing is identifying potential sites and getting clear costing. And then we would also be sending it out to the community to say, okay, we had really generic numbers and just an idea before, but now we actually have, some more detailed ideas, and can you tell us, can you do that? And there is an opportunity at that point, if council doesn't like any of the proposals, receive any of the proposals, then we can say, okay, we tried and we're not doing it. But an RFP, I'm hearing you say, kind of locks us into potentially saying we're going to contract for those services.
That's correct.
So if I may, I'm just going to provide some general thoughts. So the report didn't get me to a strong yes, and I think that's really reasonable. I think it's actually indicative of the challenges we face when looking at this issue. We've got a housing shortage, growing homelessness, we've got a toxic drug supply and an overdose crisis, economic uncertainty, and a global pandemic. I think there is no clear path forward. And the way that we're wrestling with this, I think, is really reflective of how things are going. This isn't about our personalities. I think we're doing really good work on the long game with the MOU, the NAV Center, the SPO, and I believe we'll see some relief as those new resources come online. We're attempting to address the immediate impact as we're doing that long-term stuff with increased security and significant efforts to support our downtown core. And I think we can absolutely carry on as is, paying ever-increasing costs for security while waiting for those resources to come online. But the reality is that our homeless population has grown by almost 250% since 2016. And those numbers don't show any sign of slowing. The Health and Housing Action Plan further tells us that 6,000 individuals are on the edge or close to becoming homeless. And that's the number that really terrifies me. I've had the opportunity to connect with some frontline workers and just kind of get their sense. The two things I heard very clearly is that in-reach is very important, so having a centralized place where medical service providers, social service providers, et cetera, can go to meet that population, to deliver that care is really important. And also tailoring our approaches. One of the things I really like about the Cowichan model is that it identifies not everyone wants to be housed, not everyone is going to be successful in these models, but we're going to pull out the people who we think do have a high chance of success, as you call it. I'm sorry, I forget the term, but we're going to curate the people going into that setting so we have a greater chance of success. I also really like that Cowichan is using their model as a, I'm not going to get the word right, but it's an interim measure between being on the street and going into permanent supportive housing units. So it's almost like part of their triage process, and I really like that. Some of the points that make me wary, the Cowichan model, I visited down there twice, I've had numerous conversations, it really seems to be built upon personality and passion. And I'm hearing from staff that we don't have the capacity. So I'm feeling a disconnect there in terms of Cowichan's success and our ability to replicate it. I think what I'm trying to express here, and where I find that we always get to, is we lock horns because we kind of keep failing to have this bigger conversation of what is our role in things like health and housing, because it is kind of, it's the province's job. We all kind of recognize that, but it really is, it's our community that has 600 to 800 individuals who are homeless. And I liken it to, it's a silly analogy, but my next door neighbor's house is on fire, and the fire department, it's their job to come, and they're gonna come eventually, but I'm sure as heck gonna do everything I can with my garden hose or whatever, because that fire has the potential to damage not just that property, but everything else around it. And I kind of see our homeless situation in the same light. It's not just about homeless individuals, it's about our downtowns, the stability of our entire downtown core. It's about people feeling safe. I really appreciated the GM comments. I think these are, when we're entering into these kind of meaty discussions, it's really good to have our policymakers give us their honest opinion, and I really appreciated that. So I have some reservations for sure, but ultimately I'm willing to make an investment that, if done properly and intentionally, will reduce the strain on business, on residents in general, and specifically on those without homes. So I'm happy to support.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Just going back to the comments on this, although there is no capacity nor the required skill set within our organization to manage temporary housing as such, if council wished to proceed with a project of this nature, we would issue a request for proposal for one or more site operators. And it's from that information that I thought we should at least put out a request for proposal for one or more site operators and see where it goes from there. I'm not making any decision right now. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what the proposal will be when it comes back. But I do know that all of this takes time. I know it takes time even to create the request for the proposal. So I'm thinking that we follow this advice, that if we as council do wish to proceed, the right way to proceed is either a request for proposal, and I'm not sure if we need to do a friendly amendment for request for information, because maybe an RFI is more appropriate since we don't have all the detailed information to actually be able to ask for a request for proposal. I'm not sure if that's a friendly amendment or...
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. Normally, I don't like to encourage friendly amendments, but this is very minor, and if the seconder is in agreement to change it from that a request for proposal, the word proposal be changed to a request for expression of interest, sorry, an EOI, a request for expression of interest. It is fundamentally different, but it is in the stages so early that a request for proposal is probably premature.
Who wishes to speak to this? And in terms of the friendly amendment, who's the seconder?
So the seconder was...
I was second.
Yeah, so it was
Councillor
Gesselbrock, and then seconded by Councillor Martman. So, yeah, Councillor Gesselbrock would have to want to do this, and if not, maybe a formal amendment is necessary.
Yeah.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
So as a mover, I think I'd prefer a formal amendment so that we can discuss it, yeah.
So if perhaps Councillor Hemmens or another member of council would like to formally amend that.
Move to change the wording from request for proposal to request for interest.
Expression of interest.
Sorry,
It's an expression.
of interest,
It's an
sorry.
EOI, expression of interest. Sorry, I confused that in the first.
Moved by Councillor Hemmens, seconded. Councillor Martman. On the amendment. Yes. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you. So here we go. Now making amendments to motions that we have just heard about for the first time this afternoon. This is not good practice. It's not good governance. And I'm really concerned that this is not the first time that this council has gone down this road. Mr. Cuff, as your worship likes to quote, first heard deferred. And I just don't think that this is the proper way to go. I would prefer that we take this motion off the table and go back to simply a straightforward motion asking for staff to give us pros and cons of how we could investigate following the Cowichan model. But to talk about requests for proposals, oh, well, we don't really know what that means. We better change it to request for information. This is just getting silly, so I won't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Martman, did you wish to speak to
No,
this?
I won't speak any further.
Councillor Armstrong?
I guess I can speak because it's new motion, so I've only
Yes,
got my
you may.
two. Actually, I've only used one. To me, this expression of interest is no different than what staff's already done. They've already gone out to the providers, and as you stated, your worship, nobody came back saying they're interested. They don't have the capacity. You know, I would love to solve no child goes to bed hungry. Every child gets a dentist. We can't do that. It's not realistic. I mean, we not only this, we've got this report, then Councillor Martman's got another one coming out that's going to task that same staff for another big report. We seem to think these reports are going to take them an hour to 2 hours. That's not accurate. They're 2 to 3 weeks, some of these reports. There's a lot of work involved in these, and I don't think we recognize that. When we see the general manager's comments outline all his concerns, we should be listening to those. And not only that, not in there is Reimagine Nanaimo, which is the same staff. So we got to make some decisions. What is important, what's not? When you talked about the fires, I get what you're saying, but you know what? Sometimes there's 5 fires, you can only go to 4, so you have to prioritize it. Just like in policing, you prioritize. We have to start doing that. We can't do everything, and our staff certainly can't. I mean, for me, if we're going to do that, then let's get rid of the navigation center, because you can't have that same group trying to do both. It's not fair and it's not right. We have staff capacity issues. And going to that tent city, these people that you're going to house with this are not the people that are going to go to a tent city. We're going to have a tent city regardless. It's going to come because it's the people that need to be in the navigation center that are going to cause your tent city. So to me, and I oppose the navigation center as I've done, but to me that's far more important to get that up and running than these houses, because it's those people that need the help more so than the other people. So I really think we got to start really focusing on what is important. You know, I mean, it's frustrating to me because we keep hearing from our staff, and we just keep throwing more and more on them. And we're going to have some burnout, and we're not going to have some staff because they're going to be off sick. Pure and simple, they're going to be off sick because they don't have the capacity to keep doing this. We keep asking more and more from basically, 3 people? Like, look at all that there, and that's basically 3 people doing that. That's a lot of work. So I'm really concerned about that. I mean, even doing the support to the working group into the implementation of the health and housing action, that's a month to 2 months work for one person. And now we throw all this other stuff on, then we're going to have the request for a report onto, you know, trailers and all that, which, you know, I think is great, but we got to really start thinking about our staff capacity, because they don't have it, and we're going to screw things up, and we're going to lose funding opportunities because we're going to be making mistakes because they're tired or they're missing out on stuff. I'm with the mayor when he talks about the navigation center. That's confirmed that we have those dollars. We don't know who's going to fund this. We don't know who's going to provide supports. VHO is pretty self-explanatory. They don't have the people to provide the supports. They don't. They're at it. Our partners don't have the capacity, and they've told us that they don't have the capacity. BC Housing doesn't have the capacity for this. They want to go for permanency. I mean, we're doing pretty damn good. 7 sites is pretty good. It's probably more than any place else in the province has gotten. And that's from the work of our staff. And I'm just very concerned that we don't start listening to what they're saying. It's not often that you see them saying that here's what we're doing, and we're stressed to the max. So I'm just not going to support it this time because we just don't have the capabilities. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Oh, no. Oh, but I don't need to speak now.
I'm not going to support it either, and for reasons that I've already stated earlier tonight. But I do want to say a couple of things. Last Friday, most of us, I believe, all of us, spent 3 hours doing a special workshop sponsored through the Regional District of Nanaimo, and one of the topics was good governance, which Councillor Thorpe has referred to earlier tonight. someone wise person who was communications director to my carcourt once said to me, nobody cares about the state of the MLA's emotions. And so when I say this, I say it tongue-in-cheek. I appreciate no one cares that I'm getting frustrated, as are some members of council, with this growing tendency to bring forward notices of motion at either the last minute or out of the best felt and passionate desires. I don't see it as good governance. I'm not prepared to support motions, no matter how virtuous they are, if they offend the basic principles of good governance. This is not an emergency. Let us be blunt. This problem has been building for years, and it will continue to be with us for years. We know what the solutions are, as Councillor Hemmons alluded to in her remarks earlier tonight. We all know what the solutions are. And we keep coming up with proposals to try and provide some sort of interim measure, et cetera, et cetera. Councillor Gesselbrock gave a very moving description of the individual he saw. That individual in that shape is not going to be going into one of these little units. Let's get real. In any civilized world where the police could act knowing with confidence that something would happen, that person would be picked up, taken to the hospital, they would be then transferred at some point to an institution and cared for appropriately, I suspect, for months into years. But that's not happening. We are not going to solve that problem, as the one Councillor Gesselbrock alluded to, by doing this. So I will not be supporting the motion. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I'm all for a more civilized world, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing it. And I don't know where that leadership is going to come from, but I think that we need to just make a step forward and make some moves. I understand the issue of staff capacity. It's something that we come up against all the time, and we may have to shuffle some things momentarily. I think that there are a few things that are probably less a priority than providing a shelter for people in this town that we're seeing. And frankly, it's sickening that we're getting to the place where it's starting to become okay to just step over somebody. And when you start seeing a society that just steps over people, there's stuff strewn all over the place while they're, it's sick. It's absolutely sick. And so virtue signaling as it may be, I think we need to put our foot down. And I think that I'm all for if an expression of interest is something that we need to do to step things back, let's do it. But I want to make it clear that we're going to allocate funding to make, 2 of these sites happen, which are very small. It's only for 24 people. But it can be a proof of concept of maybe something that could work and provide some temporary solution while the rest of the leadership of this province figure out what we can do. And we're all working hard, but maybe we need to start allocating more resources to this, because we are seeing it worsen and we're getting used to it, which is really sad. Thank you.
Mr. Ridolph, did you want to say something before I go to Councillor Brown?
Say anything, Your Worship. Just an observation. What we see is council seeing a lot of homeless on the streets in this community, and you're seeking short-term housing solutions. This may be one, but so if in a way, and there's a second motion tonight looking at something else, and it sort of feels a bit shotgunish, to be honest, not strategic. And there may be other options. What are those trailers going to be used for at Terminal and Labio when they're finished? I mean, there's lots. We already have temporary housing in the city. We have 150 people in them. It's a lot more than the 12 or 18 that were in Duncan. We are totally invested in this. So I think if it's council will to do this, you are going to have more workshops and time to talk about housing as early as next Monday. Housing strategy, how does this fit in, and that type of thing. So it's not like it's the end of the conversation tonight. If you do go down this path, there is a fair amount of work attached to this. It will just get bigger and bigger. It's a bit of the tip of the iceberg, I'm afraid. And that's fine. So we have to go into this with our eyes open, because the more we peel back the layers, the more layers there will be. I think that's sort of one thing. Is it worth the return on investment, the amount of time that we're going to have to get into this? And so I'm not so sure it's a capacity issue with the service providers. It's a nervousness about getting into uncharted waters. So there's not a lot of experience with the service provider community in dealing with a housing model that's not contained within four walls, everybody in the same place. And I mentioned to you earlier that I had seen a similar proposal flounder ultimately in Abbotsford, but it was the same. The problem ultimately became a service provider, and this was in the VHOT letter. I noticed it, that they support it, but it needs a quality service provider to step up and look at it. And in that case, they weren't able to find one at the end of the day. The other part of this is nobody's really going to step forward in a fulsome way until it's a lot of certainty around the location. So we've gotten no guidance from council whatsoever on what type of location you'd be satisfied with. So we have to sort of spitball this out a bit. Is it parks? Is it vacant lands? Is it residential? Is it industrial? There's a lot of questions around that, so we can only guess what might be. And this is a form of, and the other piece of it that I was thinking about is, as much as we may be going down this path, I'm not convinced that we can deliver on this in a timely way, because there could be some zoning concerns and all these servicing and all those types of things. So we may be finding ourselves going down a path that takes months to do this. And so I just want to manage expectations in terms of if you're thinking that this is it's a quick turnaround, because it may not be. And we've already struggled, as you know, to find sites for permanent housing, supportive housing, and that type of thing. So I'm not throwing cold water on it. I'm just saying this is the reality in my mind of thinking through the scenarios. And we haven't even gotten to the stage where the police and bylaws will be ultimately responsible for attending to situations there. And if the game plan is, and the intent is hopefully address some of the street prevalent populations, it's unlikely that those people will be the ones that would be candidates suitable for this type of housing. And as I believe it, I understand from Duncan, it was more the easier housing. You build for success. And so we're not dealing with the most hardest to house with any of these solutions. And that gets back to the mayor's proposition of dealing with that. So I think all the hearts are in the right place. It's just the reality is it's going to be a bit tricky. And there's if we're investing our time in this, we just have to go into this with our eyes open. That's all. And we will certainly do our best to come back to you with the information that you want. But there's a lot with the one issue. There's a lot attached to it.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think the formal amendment's on the floor, correct? Okay, so I'll try to bracket my comments in respect to that.
Timely point, Councillor Brown.
I have to admit, this report wasn't what I was expecting, and I think it's because of that first line in the original motion. I read that as the capital cost for 2 to 3 pilot locations. And so I was a little shocked when I didn't actually see locations. And I think some of that conversation is stemming tonight. So it's hard to, I thought that motion was going further than what the report came back. So it's tough to reconcile that path forward with, I think, that. But with that said, I agree with Mr. Rudolph that we lack a short-term strategy, and I think there has been some good work on the long-term strategy, and that will unfold. But I think we lack that short-term strategy precisely because what Councillor Hemmond said earlier, and that's because we really aren't having the conversation like a true conversation to figure this out and say this is our stance. And I think we get really caught up on these particulars, and then the passions take over. And I don't actually think that's benefiting good policy and a path forward. Because I do think there's good things happening, but if I know one absolute thing, all those good things are not enough. And that's no fault of anyone's, it's just the reality. Well, I think it is the fault of some people, but it's like we all share blame in that. So there's no pointing fingers there. And I think I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think we have a lack of conversation because the problem is so big, scary, and wicked, and we don't want to make mistakes, and we don't want to, perceptually spend tax dollars on something that doesn't work out or anything like that. But I do know also that when organizations want to do things, they can do them and they get it done. I've seen it. I've seen this organization do it. I've seen the political will in other organizations and how that can be championed into transformational change in a relatively short period of time. And I think I still stand behind that. I think, you know, the lack of conversation has not translated, or the lack of conversation has translated into a lack of will on any path. The will to just say, no, this is our stance, we're not getting involved, or to say, you know what, we are going to get involved in some way, and this is how we're going to do it. So I support the amendment, actually, to expression of interest. If nobody comes back with anything, okay, case closed. If someone does come back with something, I'm willing to have that conversation about what we pivot on, or how we pivot towards that, and what we might need to drop and make some of those. Because, like Councillor Gesselbrock, I think it's a pretty scary place when you start to get where people are walking over people in the streets and not even thinking about it. It's not the type of city that I want to live in. I'm under no illusions that I think that 24 potential campsites can make a dent in things, but it would matter to someone. And even if it's a small amount, even if the problem continues to get worse, I'm not prepared to live in a world where we just don't pick up that one starfish on the rocks and throw it back in the water instead of letting it dry out on the rocks. So I'm going to support this, especially as the amendment as expression of interest. And if no one comes back or it doesn't work, I'm going to support something else until something starts working.
Thank you very much. No further speakers on the amendment. All those in favor? Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Brown, and Bonner, and those opposed to the amendment, Councillors Armstrong, Mayor Krog, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Turley. The amendment passes. On the main motion, is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the main motion?
The main motion as amended, Your Worship.
As amended, yes, sorry. Quite right. Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Brown, and Bonner. Opposed? Councillors Armstrong, Mayor Krog, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Turley. Motion carries. Thank you very much. On to Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaws. Thank you for your attendance, all three of you, on this. Ms. Leggin and Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm going to turn this over immediately to Ms. Mercer, and we will present the bylaw for decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the regional parks and trails are managed by the RDN's Recreation and Parks Departments, and one of the funding sources for this function is a parcel tax requisitioned from the 8 electoral areas, of which the City of Nanaimo is one. And the parcel tax is used to fund parkland acquisitions and major capital development. So at their regular board meeting held on February 23rd, the RDN adopted a resolution to maintain the $20 per parcel property tax. So in order for the city to collect a parcel tax, 2 separate bylaws must be done. So one gives the city the authority to collect the parcel tax, and the other one gives the city the authority to produce a parcel tax roll. So both of those bylaws are on the table tonight for first 3 readings.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw 2021 number 7324 to provide authorization to collect a parcel tax pass first reading.
All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw 2021 number 7324 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? I must say, for what it's worth, I would have happily supported a larger property parcel tax at the regional district, which I think was entirely appropriate, but we're stuck with what we're stuck with. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw 2021 number 7324 pass third reading.
All those in favor? Seconded. Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2021 number 7323 to allow preparation of the parcel tax roll related to the regional district of Nanaimo, parcel tax for regional parks and trails, pass first reading.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2021 number 7323 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And motion that parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2021 number 7323 pass third reading.
Seconded, Thorpe. Council. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Ms. Legan once again. The Mayor's Leaders Table Terms of Reference, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. You have a staff report for decision in front of you. Mic on? Yeah, great. You have a staff report for decision in front of you regarding the terms of reference for the Nanaimo Mayor's Leaders Table, which I'll refer to as the table from this point forward. It's in response to the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resilience, which was convened in May of 2020, and a report came to Council in September of 2020. It is one of the key recommendations to establish this task force. The purpose is to establish the table, sorry, not the task force, the table to inform and collaborate across our community to further Nanaimo's opportunities and to address challenges. The broad community engagement at the table, leveraging community-wide resources under the leadership of the city, constructs a forum to align the community strategically for, number one, multi-level government infrastructure capital asks. Number two, to establish a youth attraction and retention strategy, and to build collaboration across all applicable entities and garner timely input. And finally, to create an opportunity for the broader implementation of the donut economics philosophy. In the terms of reference attached to the staff report, you see the membership. It is not all-encompassing at this point. It has, as a last bullet point, others as determined by council and by membership. Of course, the mayor and two councillors will be on this at this table. At this point, we've had an addition with Snuneymuxw First Nation to be represented also, as well as Petroglyph. And the eligibility is the for being part of the table. It'll be convened by invitation from the mayor, and to be eligible, you must be the most senior person within the entity being represented, and it cannot be delegated, as we're looking for the decision makers and a lot of progress in what will be 4 meetings a year, which is the meeting frequency, so on a quarterly basis. A lot of the work will be done between the table meetings at the committee level. We anticipate, with the terms of reference, that there'll be 3 inaugural committees, one being for the infrastructure ask, one being for the youth attraction and retention, and lastly for the donut economic philosophy awareness. As we anticipate that the membership will be divided 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 into these inaugural committees, we see the committees being able to meet without having a lot of extra stress and strain on our legislative services. They'll be able to meet at likely one of the community organization venues and supported by some of the resources within our community. There will also be a staff person at all of the meetings so that we'll make sure that the governance model is well in place. The term will be 1 year with 1-year extensions. The governance structure is anticipated to be the mayor to chair the table quarterly and to appoint 2 councillors as alternative chairs. The mayor will initiate a call for agenda items 30 days in advance of the quarterly meetings and produce and distribute an agenda and associated package at least 7 days in advance. The meetings will be open to community, so very transparent process. And that is the terms of reference.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ligon. Councillor Armstrong?
Just wanted to move the recommendation.
Please. Councillor Hammond, seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Armstrong, you wish to say anything? No? Councillor Thorpe?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I did have a quick comment. I do support this mayor's leadership table, but my thoughts when I looked at the terms of reference related to membership were 2 things. First, I guess I'm a little concerned about Zoom meeting burnout. And when I look down this list of 20 or 21 organizations, I'd comment that the city already meets on a regular basis with certainly at least half of them, probably more if we include the economic development function. So I'd need assurance that these meetings will be worthwhile on worthwhile topics, and I'm sure with the mayor's leadership they will. And then secondly, related to membership, when you try to be inclusive, there's a danger of being exclusive. And I look down this list and I see, oh, these are very worthwhile organizations, but I could probably point to several that I can think of that are not on this list. And I would just put that out there for your comment, because when you try to include everybody, you might miss somebody. Any response?
Through your worship, to Councillor Thorpe, appreciate the comment, and it is certainly an art to put a list together that's representative of the community. There's no science. It could be exhaustive. I do believe that we've tried to capture the key entities that are that have demonstrated an interest in being part of the city's collaborative efforts, and we certainly anticipate with these terms of reference that any additional organizations could be invited to the table as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Similar comment. I'm really excited to see this work get underway. Looking at the membership list, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's massive and could be so cumbersome. Appreciate that it's broken down into the 3 smaller groups. I did have community input that the Nanaimo Arts Council should be included. So I want to flag that for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that this will prove to be a coalition of the willing who will respond. If they're on the list and they don't wish to, that will tell us. Because out of the coalition of the willing, I hope we'll get a coalition of the able as well, and will actually make this useful. I will appreciate this work that staff has put into this in terms of getting it together. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. I note we are at 9 o'clock. Shall we take the break? 10 minutes? 5? 5 will drift to 10 anyway, so let's take a 5-minute break and drift till 10. Thank you.
Our emergency routes, they are priority routes. They consist of roads that go to and from the hospitals, from the fire department stations, and from the BC ambulance stations. They're also their main commerce routes through the city of Nanaimo. So this allows commerce to happen during a snow event. So we hit those roads first. Once those are clear and open, then we move into the secondary roads, and then we move into the residential areas, which are dead-end roads and cul-de-sacs. And it can take up to 96 hours before we get into the residential areas. One of the side effects of plowing snow is it does end up on the sidewalk, and this can be very frustrating for homeowners and business owners that have just cleaned the sidewalk. It also pulls into their driveways. The crews try to keep it as close to the curb as they can, but we need to open the road right up to the curb to allow the drains to be exposed for when the snow starts to melt.
So this is one of our larger winter maintenance vehicles. They're very versatile in that they can be equipped with a lot of our different pieces of equipment. Right now this one has a front plow, a belly plow, as well as a salter or spreader box. We also have a brine unit that fits into this vehicle. This is the belly plow, and it's really good at removing hard-packed snow and ice. And then back up here to the front, we have what everyone is more familiar with. This front plow can push a lot of snow, so make sure that you slow down and keep your distance from the vehicles to ensure safety.
We have 17 vehicles that we use within the snow and ice operations for the city of Nanaimo. We also have an early shift that starts at 5 in the morning, and we have a night patrol, an afternoon shift, and an evening shift. They are eyes on the road, keeping us appraised of the conditions so that when the snow starts falling or ice starts forming on the roads, they can start salting and also call for other resources and mobilize the crews out.
This is one of the City of Nanaimo Public Works snow and ice control vehicles. And this is actually set up for a brining unit right now, or anti-icing. And what brine is a 23.3% sodium chloride solution. And it comes out of the spray bars down here at the bottom, and it's made here at the Public Works yard. It's a proactive method of snow and ice control, as when we know that there's a winter storm coming, we can actually lay this down on the road prior to the event.
By putting the brine down before the snow comes, it buys time. It lets us get on the roads, and then when we hit it with the plows, it doesn't stick. The snow doesn't stick, it comes off much easier. Whereas if we didn't brine, the snow has an opportunity to freeze to the road.
So another benefit of the brining or anti-icing unit is that during the frosty mornings, we can have it drive down the road, and then immediately the frost disappears as they're applying the brine.
Brine's a great tool for us. It's very cost effective. We can stretch our hard-pressed tax dollars to the maximum. We can make brine for cents on the dollar.
So the other thing that we ask is that everyone stays back from these anti-icing or any winter maintenance vehicles, as they have limited visibility and it's poor conditions out there, and they're trying to maneuver around everything. So just stay back and give them a little bit of room to operate and clear the roads.
So here we are in the Public Works yard, City of Nanaimo, and what you look around, you can see our various tools that we use for snow and ice fighting. We have tandem trucks, 4x4 trucks, we have backhoes. All our trucks are capable of having front plows on them, and the larger trucks we have belly plows on them as well, and they all have a salter sander that can be mounted on the back.
This is another tool in our winter maintenance fleet. It's a salting machine. And what happens is that the salt gets loaded into this hopper, and on this conveyor where it gets hit with these two saddle tanks, which are full of brine. Then it comes out here on the spreader. And why we add the brine is that it reduces the amount of spray from the salt, so it doesn't bounce nearly as far, saving about 20 to 30% of our salt. As well, by using the anti-icing liquid on the salt, the activation starts right as it hits the road.
The purpose of the salt is to keep the roads bare, keep ice from forming on the road. Again, safety for everyone, including ourselves and the public. That's why we put the salt down.
Today we're talking about clearing catch basins or road drains on residential roads. The first thing to understand is where the catch basin is in proximity to your residence. When clearing a catch basin or road drain, we want to make sure that you make yourself visible and aware of oncoming traffic. When clearing snow or debris from a catch basin, we ask that you put it in an area where it will not plug the catch basin again, not placing it on an already shoveled driveway or sidewalk. Sandbags are available at 2020 Labio Road 24/7. Just remember to make sure you bring a shovel. The City of Nanaimo and Public Works appreciate your help in keeping your catch basins clear. Thank you.
On snow days like this, the city of Nanaimo sends out a fleet of plows. How well equipped are these trucks?
They're really well equipped. They all have plows and sanders on them. We come with a belly plow too, so we're well prepared once we get a big snow like this. A lot of waves, a lot of friendly faces. People are pretty happy when you come and rescue them and clear off their road. So on our maps to determine where we go, we follow our red routes, which are our bus routes and our major routes, and they're first. Then our secondary routes are in purple, followed lastly by our side streets, which are in yellow. We try not to cover a nicely shoveled driveway, but sometimes we don't really have an option, and it's unfortunate. We're not trying to do it on purpose.
In some cases, the plows can't scrape heavily packed or iced snow right down to the surface of the pavement. So how does it clear away?
We're taking off as much as we can, and then we're putting lots of salt down to melt the rest. So sometimes it just takes a little bit longer, but it's usually pretty effective. Salting is really important because if we get it down like this, then roads won't freeze, and way safer for the drivers out there.
And in terms of safety and getting the job done, are there some challenges to plowing in Nanaimo?
Yeah, Nanaimo's got a lot of hills, a lot of narrow streets, cars parked on it. It can be pretty tough sometimes.
How can drivers parking on the side of the road in Nanaimo help?
Just make sure they're parked legally and as close to the curb as possible so we can widen the streets as much as we can. We don't always move very fast, but that's important to push the snow, so we really appreciate if people can give us a little bit of space. These are big trucks. We have salters going, spinning, and we're still on a lot of ice and snow, so when we try to go up a hill, if people are right behind us, it can be dangerous for everybody. So we appreciate if everybody can give us some space behind us, and we'll give lots of space in front.
Fire station number 1. Ms. Ligon, it's a big number.
Which is the third draw from the Municipal Financial Authority for Fire Station Number 1, which is a project previously approved by Council in 2018. The two motions are approve the borrowing of $11,160,000 from the Municipal Finance Authority of BC. And the second one is that the Regional District of Nanaimo be requested to consent to the City of Nanaimo borrowing this amount of money, and this is because of Section 179 of the Community Charter, which requires that our borrowing be done through a regional district and the Municipal Finance Authority.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong. Or Councillor Bonner, you've got a question?
No, I was going to just make the motion, but then I realized there are bylaws.
I was going to give it to the Deputy Acting Mayor, but
All right, to
you go.
approve borrowing $11,160,000 from the Municipal Finance Authority of British Columbia as part of the 2021 fall borrowing session and as authorized through Fire Station Number 1 Borrowing Bylaw 2018, number 7257.
And?
You take it together?
You can move them together.
And that the Regional District of Nanaimo be requested to consent to the City of Nanaimo borrowing the $11,160,000 over a 20-year term and include the borrowing in a security issuing bylaw.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion?
Let's roll.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next is item 12E, Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. Mr. Sims, please. Thank you, Ms. Ligon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The staff report in front of you this evening is requesting your support for a joint application with the Regional District of Nanaimo to join with the Circular Cities and Regions Initiative, which is spearheaded by the Metro Vancouver arm and the Zero Waste Council. I'm sorry, I blanked there. So there's an opportunity for the city and the region together to join in with 14 other municipalities across the country in a peer-to-peer networking learning opportunity, I would say. So it's all about knowledge sharing, capacity building, those wonderful things. But the intent is really to grow our knowledge around zero waste, the circular economy, and how we can work together already with the regional district. So it's a very good learning opportunity. I think it's happening with a combination of webinars over the next several months, and then peer-to-peer discussions, and then eventually it builds to a bit of an action plan on how we can move to more of a circular economy approach. So, and this will help with our zero waste goals as well. One of the things that wasn't clear early on was whether the CCRI or the Canadian Circular Cities and Regions Initiative, whether we could apply as a joint effort. And the organizers said Nanaimo was already sort of on their radar, with the press around donut economics. So they maybe that's a nudge in our favor, but who knows? So the application is already being prepared on the part of regional district and city staff in anticipation that this would be fruitful. A similar report's going in front of the regional district board next week, I believe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Kesselbach.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sims. It's great to see this report. The director of this program had actually reached out to me a couple months ago and had a conversation with them. And yeah, it sounds like a great initiative, and I'm really grateful for the initiative staff to reach out on their own accord to make the connection. And I think that one, for the work that the regional district and the city's done, we can offer a lot to other communities in that peer-to-peer, and then also learn from some folks. So I look forward to seeing the strategy or action steps that come out of this, and what that'll look for the city's role in this. So thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very much in favor of this. I have a question, sort of not related, but I'm curious how the things work. Mr. Sims, if I may throw you to Mr. Sims, how does this fall into your department?
How is it following? Oh, this is a good question, Your Worship. This is
He lost the bet.
Mr. Lindsay was busy with other things, so no. In actual fact, so the zero waste and sanitation is really within my purview. So that's the angle we're taking with it.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Councillor Armstrong, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll make a motion or recommendation that council endorse joint application. The Regional District of Nanaimo to join the Circular Cities and Regions Initiatives peer-to-peer network.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Martman. Councillor Bonner, did you? No.
Vote to vote.
All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is lease to RCMP 575 Fitzwilliam Street. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to turn this item over to Mr. Corson for introduction.
Mr. Corson.
Thanks, Your Worship. So we're seeking council's approval tonight to enter into a new 5-year lease agreement for what we call the ARC building at 575 Fitzwilliam. This is a city-owned asset that's used by both the municipal RCMP as well as the federal RCMP. The RCMP have been holding over on the existing lease. This new lease would actually be backdated to July 1st, 2020. It's for 5 years. We've structured the lease so that it could be canceled in June of 2023, depending on the results of the civic precinct study which we're doing for you, which looks at different options for how we can support the expansion of the office facilities for the RCMP. And I think that's all we have for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner?
I'm just going to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item G, rezoning application number RA 4565915 Metral Drive. Mr. Holm. You waited a long time for this tonight. All things come to those who wait. Isn't that in the Bible somewhere?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I believe we actually have a delegation on to speak to this item as well tonight, so I won't say too much, but
Just sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Holm, but actually the delegation is not on the line, so
okay,
just so
thank you.
you're aware of that. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, so if we could just maybe bring up the context map, if that's possible, overhead. That's attachment A to the staff report, just for reference. So this rezoning, this is a property on Metro Drive. It's located between Dumont and Doreen Place, and it's within the corridor designation in the official community plan. The concept plan here is for 28 units, rezoning from R1 to Core 1, and the proposal, this is just a concept at the moment, but it includes a mix of townhomes and micro suites. So the townhomes are proposed as 2-bedroom units, and this is again just rezoning, so it is a concept, and they are proposing though micro suites as well, so 29 square meter or less units in the mix as well. So a mix of housing proposed there, and again, it's within the corridor designation. The proposal is consistent with the official community plan policy for the corridor designation. It's also consistent and supports the objectives of the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Strategy and the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan. The property is located on the on Metro Drive, obviously the site of a large capital project initiative to develop Metro Drive as a complete street. It's within phase 2 of that project, which is slated for completion in 2022. So that's a pretty exciting improvement to the transportation network surrounding the development and fronting on the development. The proposals within the properties within an area that has a number of single-family dwellings to the south. It's got an existing townhome development to the west. It's also got a place of worship close by and is in close proximity to Pleasant Valley School as well. The proposal includes a community amenity contribution that's proposed as $1,000 per unit, and it's slated to go towards the city's Housing Legacy Reserve. The proposal is supported by staff, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, that's all I have to say on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner, you're first on the...
Thank you. It's left over from last time, but I'll take advantage of it.
Well, I don't want to steal Councillor Armstrong's thunder in
Go
position
ahead.
as acting. Certainly.
I'm guessing ordinarily, because of that particular piece of road there, doesn't have any sidewalks on it and everything, that a subdivision and future development would have required that the owner do the road right of way, or the term for it. Since we're doing it, what happens to the money they would have been required to do on frontage?
So, yeah, that's correct, through your worship, to Councillor Bonner. Generally, so through building permit in this case, when they get to that point, through the building bylaw, the frontage works and service requirement would be triggered for the property. We'd expect that, and it will be for other properties along Metro Drive as well that come in for development. In this case, if the Metro Drive project is not complete, then they would be subject to providing the works and services, the frontage works and services, because the city is completing the street. If they come in after the street is complete, they won't be required to provide for frontage works and services, curbs, gutter, sidewalks, street lighting, and the complete streets package. They may have some servicing upgrades to do, service connections and whatnot, but the frontage works fronting the property will have been complete, and that will be the same for other properties on Metro Drive as well.
Something reminds me in our conversation we've had about similar things to this in the past, is that there's a situation where it's not paying it forward, but a bunch of work is done and everyone is required to chip into it later on. And I'm trying to think of I don't know what the term of it is.
Yeah, I mean, so in this case, it's the building bylaw that triggers the requirement for frontage works. And the city is undertaking those works through a capital project. It does achieve, that capital project achieves a lot of objectives, obviously. Improvements to the transportation network, the active transportation aspect of it. Property owners fronting Metro will benefit from that if they choose to develop, and it encourages to some extent development along those significant corridors, which is a positive. And I'll just mention that.
Okay, so I'm sorry to delay this, but, so if they get their building permit in prior to us getting the work done, they will be required to do the work, and then we would come in afterwards and finish it off? That's how it usually works in the past. This is pretty close.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship again. It often comes down to timing. There's often capital projects that could be taking place in areas that are developing, and it often comes down to the timing of the capital project versus when the development would be required to do the frontage works or the infrastructure improvement. In this case, we're expecting, because the Complete Streets project is expected to be completed in 2022 in this phase, we're expecting that those works would be completed by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong?
On attachment F, I'm trying to figure out where they're going to access. Are they going to access onto Mitchell Drive? Because that's a concern, because it's so close to Doreen Place as well as Dumont. I mean, there's already trouble with traffic on that road now. So do you know where they're going to access? I couldn't find it, so perhaps it's on one of the other diagrams, but I didn't notice it.
If I could, through to your worship, that would be addressed through development permit and detailed design review there, but the proposed access is shown as far north on the property, so as far away from Doreen Place as possible. It does show up on the site plan that's attachment 6 to the agenda.
Attachment 6?
Yeah. So
I
it's
don't have a 6, mine goes by FD.
So it's proposed as far north on the property as possible, away from.
Sorry. By 5955?
Sorry?
Would it be by 5955?
That's correct. It's closer to 5955, that's correct.
So, yeah.
So as close to mid-block as possible.
Well, if the developer's listening, that's going to be an issue. I'm going to have the traffic, especially in a school zone. Thank you.
Shall we let Councillor Bonner move the motion then?
Of course.
Sure.
Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor.
So I'm sorry, Your Worship, it's a bylaw, so we need it read out. Councillor Armstrong, we need it read out. It's a bylaw.
Oh, it's bylaw. I'll read it. Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.184 to rezone the 5915 Mitchell Drive from single dwelling residential R1 to residential corridor COR1 to allow for multifamily residential development pass first reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Thorpe? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. None. Councillor Armstrong?
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.184 pass second reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? You were seeking discussion, were you, Councillor Martin, or you're just anxious to vote?
We were getting ready to vote.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong?
Motion that council direct staff to secure the community amenity contribution and sanitary sewer right-of-way should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is item H, rezoning application number RA 458, 1621 Northfield Road. Mr. Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. If you could bring up the context map as well on this to attachment A, that would be helpful. This is a property located on Northfield, and it's located between Dugan and Boundary. So another corridor development. It's corridor designated in the official community plan. The area is generally on the north side of Northfield. It contains sort of light industrial uses, and then on the south side of Northfield, single family residential and townhouse type uses. This is the proposal that the concept here is for 9 units, multifamily, sort of a townhouse form development. Again, this proposal aligns with the official community plan, Nanaimo Affordable Housing Strategy policies, as well as the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan objectives. It's in close proximity to Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. It is on a major corridor. It's also very closely, in very close proximity to the ENN Trail. And so well situated to transportation and employment and services. The proposal includes a community amenity contribution of $1,000 per unit towards Bevan Park improvements. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, this is going back, we've had rezoning applications on this road before, and there was concerns again about the amount of traffic coming onto Northfield Road, and somewhere it wasn't allowed. So where is this one going to happen? Because we've got that new design of the road with the light there, and they're going to be pulling right in. And I'm concerned about the blocking of ambulance because they can't get around with the way the new design is if they're coming east on Northfield. Because you got the abutment there, they're going to have to go around up and over, which is not conducive to good. So I was just wondering if there was any consultation on that.
We're near it.
Sorry, if you could, through your worship, if you could clarify.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about is probably you're going to have 10 to 12 vehicles coming out of there. And because the light is just like 2 houses down, they're going to be blocking the road. And then there's the abutment there, so an ambulance can't get around. That's my concern.
Okay. Yeah, we, through referrals, our transportation section didn't identify any concerns once the road improvements are made. There will be frontage improvements through this development as well.
Just a question on that, did we talk to the ambulance? Because I find that doesn't happen often, and they're the ones that use that road the most. That's one of the main roads to the hospital. It is the main road.
Yeah, through your worship, again, I don't think specifically we would have, but our road designs and our through the detailed design review that'll take place through building permit, there would be engineering involvement in that and consideration to those types of things.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Armstrong, are you going to move the?
Yeah, if there's no more questions, motion that zoning
Far
amendment.
more questions, but all right, we'll go to Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Yeah, my concerns are similar to Councillor Armstrong's regarding development on Northfield and the previous situations we've had there. And I realize this is not a development permit. It's simply rezoning, but it leads to what will be serious concerns on my part about traffic egress especially. So it makes it difficult to support this knowing that I might not be able to support something down the road by allowing this rezoning. And that's not a question, it's just a statement of opinion. But I guess there's no recourse except to wait and see what the development permit brings. But I think this location is problematic for traffic coming out onto Northfield. And we did turn down one application for development because the traffic we wanted it to reroute onto a back alley, which wasn't satisfactory. So yeah, this is going to be a tricky one. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Your Worship, if I could help alleviate some of these, obviously I'm not speaking for staff here, but as a person who watches the ambulances go by on Northfield daily, they always turn down Bowen and go down Meredith. I've never yet seen an ambulance go down Northfield. So I don't think you have to worry about that because when they're heading the hospital, that's the direction they go. And having been around that section of the thing is the lights only change only when there's a left turn light on coming off the highway. And so there's very rarely traffic ever backed up there as well.
Nothing like some local knowledge.
You have to get a bike. It'll be a lot easier.
All right. Would someone care to move the motion then? Well, they have to read it out, please.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.185 to rezone 1621 Northfield Road from single dwelling residential R1 to residential corridor COR1 pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.185 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that council direct staff to secure the road dedication, statutory right-of-way, and community contribution prior to the adoption of the bylaw. Should council support the bylaw at third reading?
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to item I, Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 412-5100 Hammond Bay Road. And Mr. Holm.
Thank you again, Your Worship. This is a development variance permit that's proposed as to reduce lot frontages for 3 lots of a proposed 4-lot subdivision. The property is located on Hammond Bay Road at Renee Place, and it's adjacent to Harry Whipper Park. The proposed lot frontage variances are for proposed lots B, C, and D, and they're from 15 meters to 13.5 meters for lot B, 15 meters to 2.06 meters for lot C, and 15 meters to 12.04 meters for proposed lot D. The proposal is would include frontage works through subdivision on Renee Place, including sidewalk, which would provide additional pedestrian access to Harry Whipper Park. As well, there's a turnaround existing. Normally, a cul-de-sac would be developed on a short road like this, which cul-de-sac has a lesser frontage requirement. But in this case, there is a turnaround, a gravel parking area and turnaround within the park that would remain and provide vehicle turnaround there. I believe we have a delegation on the line too, but I'd be happy to take any questions later if council wishes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hanson, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I can hear you.
Please, if you wish to be a delegation, you've got 5 minutes. And at 4 minutes in, if you're still talking, I'll let you know you have a minute left. So please proceed. Hang on, Ms. Gurry's looking at...
Yeah, I think, Mr. Hanson, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're just here to answer any questions that council may have regarding the development variance permit. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I don't actually have any presentation to provide at this point.
Perfect, thank you. So if council has any questions for Mr. Hanson, he'd be happy to answer those.
You're turning down your moment at stardom. I'm just shocked. Any questions for Mr. Hanson, who's been waiting patiently? Councillor Armstrong.
I'm just wondering, when you do the new lots, is the exit going to be onto Renee Place?
Yes, thank you. Through Your Worship to Councillor Armstrong, all the accesses for the proposed development will be onto Renee Place, including the duplex site on the corner.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
No, but it matters because the depth for the road.
All right. Councillor Armstrong.
Recommendation that council issue development variance permit number DVP 412 at 5100 Hammond Bay Road with a variance to reduce the minimum lot frontage requirements as follows: from 15 meters to 13.5 meters for proposed lot B, from 15 meters to 12.06 meters for proposed lot C, and from 15 meters to 12.04 meters for proposed lot D.
Second to Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Mr. Hanson, you're done for the night. Thank you very much.
And in case you can't see Mr. Hanson, the motion carried unanimously, just so you're aware.
I think he's gone already. The next is item J, appointment of bylaw enforcement officer. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here this evening to seek council's approval to appoint Walter Ernst as a bylaw enforcement officer. Mr. Ernst is our urban forester, and part of his duties are enforcing your tree bylaw. And as such, to do so, he needs to be designated a bylaw enforcement officer. So happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Lindsay? Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that council appoint Walter Ernst as a bylaw enforcement officer for the City of Nanaimo for the purposes of enforcing City of Nanaimo bylaws in accordance with the Community Charter and the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations to Mr. Ernst. Thank you very much. The next is item K, appointment of bylaw enforcement officer. Mr. Lindsay again.
Thank you, Worship. Very similar application in this request. Sorry, this time it's for Michael Letting, who is a bylaw enforcement officer. He's actually a contractor in our Nanaimo Animal Control Services. In order to fulfill the duties of his job, is required to be designated a bylaw enforcement officer.
Motion that council appoint Michael Lading as a bylaw enforcement officer for the City of Nanaimo for the purposes of enforcing City of Nanaimo bylaws in accordance with the Community Charter and Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act.
And seconded, Councillor Hemmings. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, sorry, Councillor Turley, you had a question. You just wanted it up for proceedings to break it up, didn't you?
Question for staff. So the position, I thought I heard you say he was a contractor for the city of Nanaimo, and by changing it to a bylaw officer, does that make him a staff member of the city, or is he still just a contractor?
Sorry, no, Your Worship, he's still a contractor, just designated a bylaw officer for the purposes of your bylaws.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2021, number 7317. Ms. Gurry, can you give us the news?
Thank you, Worship. So yes, the purpose of this report is for information, and it's to provide you the results of the petition against process for the council bylaw number 7317. So the results are attached to the report along with the certificate of sufficiency that showed the total number of parcels in the BIA were 138. The total valid petitions received against the BIA proposal was 30, which is a 22% of the property owners in that area, and it's 8.75% of the assessed land value percentage. So the bylaw can now be adopted, which is next on your agenda. So this is for information.
Thank you very much. Item 13, bylaws. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that Downtown Nanaimo Business Association Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2021, number 7317, to establish a business improvement area in the downtown Nanaimo area be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? I'm certainly glad to see this happen, I must say, and I think I speak on behalf of council for the public record that this is an important decision in support of our downtown. I'm glad to see the owners and businesses in the downtown area pulling together on this. I know that several councillors, Councillor Turley and Councillor Gesselbrock, I believe, worked on this, along with many others over many years to try and revive this. So it's a very positive step forward. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no notices of motion per se now. We have other business, which is Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that council support the Mayor of Williams Lake by sending a letter to the Solicitor General, Attorney General, and the Premier of British Columbia requesting a public inquiry into the justice system in BC to determine why so many prolific offenders with serious charges are constantly released back into communities with ineffective deterrence to reoffend, and to call for action to protect communities.
We have a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to be in support of this one. We have these conversations on a fairly regular basis. I did a bit of research, and the independence of the judicial system is ground into our Constitution. And our Constitution makes the provinces, and the province makes the city. I feel this couldn't be farther out of our lane unless we were discussing the U.S. Constitution. But I'm going to support it because I believe that our city should have a view on this, and that's why I'm supporting it. Not because I particularly think it's in any particular lane, it's just that I think our city needs to have voices on these items. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, briefly, Your Worship, thank you very much. I've got the City of Williams Lake letter here, which I've read several times. A lot of the emails that council receives are from citizens who are, I think, quite frustrated with what they often call the revolving door of our court system and criminal justice system. And yes, it's out of our hands, except through advocacy. And if we want changes to be made, we've got to start somewhere. So for me, this is about wanting greater protection for our citizens and our community through more control of, and it's important to note, this is for repeat prolific offenders. So certainly an issue that does impact us here in Nanaimo every day, and it's one that I'm pleased to support. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too am going to support this, but just because it doesn't follow up to a letter, but I do think there's some issues with the motion. One, I actually don't even think a public inquiry needs to happen. I think someone just needs to get to the reforming part. But I will support this because I do know it is an issue, and the solutions I think need to be comprehensive and more than just ineffective deterrence, because there is some research that shows that's not too effective. But I do think at the heart of this is an intention to reform, to get a handle on prolific offenders that frustratingly do get re-released. So I will support this.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in favor of this, but I echo Councillor Bonner's comments. In most circumstances, I would not be supporting this because I think it is out of our lane in many respects. Save and accept this, that it calls for a public inquiry into the justice system to determine why so many prolific offenders with serious charges are constantly released. I have a pretty good grasp of the Constitution and the law and how the system works, and I don't say that in a snotty way. I mean, you can't practice law for 40 years and not pick up a couple of pointers along the way. Having said that, what judges do is apply the law under the terms of the criminal code as it exists. They apply it based on the criminal code, on precedents, on decisions of the Supreme Court of Canada or superior courts, etc. They are strongly influenced, however, in those decisions by the decisions of Crown Counsel in any given case, who will make recommendations or decide not to proceed with charges or reduce the charges and proceed with lesser charges, etc. But there is a growing sense, and we've spoken about it, we meaning all the members of this council at various times in the last couple of years, as we've watched the level of street disorder in our community and around this country rise, spoken about the releasing back into the community, pending trial or disposition or plea, many individuals who in other circumstances probably wouldn't be in the court system at all. They would be getting some form of treatment in complex care facilities of various kinds. Alternatively, there wouldn't be a policy in place, as exists with COVID, that is essentially directing people not to be incarcerated presently, which is why the numbers are down at an institution like the Bancroft Correctional Centre because of COVID concerns and health concerns, that it's unreasonable to put people in custody pending plea or trial or whatever the case may be. But the public has serious concerns about the effect of those policies, of the decisions of Crown Counsel, certainly the frustrations we know from the RCMP and bylaw officers who face these situations every day, first responders who are dealing with individuals who, as I say, would clearly be better off in treatment and not in a prison system. So I see this as a sort of cry that I'm prepared to support, and I'm going to be entirely politically practical, and I hope somebody quotes me on this. Voting against this will not be understood by the general public as anything other than a get-out-of-jail-free card for criminal behavior. So we're stuck with voting with it as well, whether or not we think it's in our lane or not, and I think that's the honest approach that I hope my comments have brought to this discussion. There is no practical alternative, because if the public hears you voted against this motion, they will assume, without dipping into the questions further, that you are somehow supportive of soft treatment of the criminal element in our community, when in fact many of the so-called criminal element are people who are suffering from addiction and mental health and acquired brain injury. But that's the situation we're stuck with. And so I come back to my little smarty pants remark earlier tonight about the state of your mayor's emotions. It's frustrating that we're having to do this but there ain't no choice, folks. So unless I've inspired somebody else, and I did, Councillor Armstrong.
I haven't spoken yet. It's my motion.
Oh, we don't want to deny you your moment in the sun. Please go
I'm
ahead.
just going to say that I do think it's our lane for the simple fact we pay 90% of the police budget. And when they're dealing with chronic offenders, that means they're not doing other things. When they keep doing that revolving court, they're not out doing foot patrols, which a lot of the public would like to see. So I do believe that it is in our lane because we are responsible for the safety, even under the community charter for our community. So that's one of the big reasons. The second reason is it's pretty common knowledge in police circles that BC is the most lenient of any court system in the country. So that's something I'd like to see. Is that rumor, is it accurate? But I'm pretty sure it's accurate. So why is that the case? And again, and I'm not blaming the local provincial court judges, and I got no problem saying publicly it's our appeal courts. So I think it's something that really needs to be looked at, and I really want the people to understand we're not talking about your general offender, we're talking about chronic, prolific offenders. Prime example is the man that stabbed the guy 5 times. Port Alberni was arrested here in Nanaimo, outstanding 4 or 5 charges and still got released. We've heard from our inspector about the number of very violent offenders that are on our streets. They just had one the other day with 50 outstanding charges released again back into our community. That's not right. It's in my opinion, that's not right. And I mean, and a lot of them do want to go into the jail system because that's where they get treatment. Sad fact, but they want federal time because that's the only place they can get free treatment. Unless they're lucked out and they can happen to go to Guthrie for 6 months versus 3 years in the Fed system. So I just think it's really important that the government hears us, that, you know what, we need to seriously look at what we're doing and hopefully take it further up and push the federal government back to justice reform, which was on the agenda until SNC Lavalin fell apart, and then that unfortunately Jody Raybould Wilson could no longer do justice reform, which was her mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Who gets to make the final motion? For adjournment?
No.
Oh.
No, sorry, Your
Excuse me.
Worship.
Sorry,
Yeah.
am I rushing?
Yes, there's the new item 15B, Councillor Markman.
Oh,
has a
yes,
motion.
sorry, pardon me.
Thank you. I might have done this as a notice of motion, as we were taught by George Cuff as to first heard, deferred. However, some of that good governance practice was determined by old white men. And I don't know if those were always the best decisions in practicing. So I want to say that sometimes I think motions have to come forward that are in a timely manner. This one that I'm bringing forward tonight is about asking for a staff report. So I will read the motion that Council directs staff to prepare a report on the options available to support permanent RV accommodation. If I get a seconder, I will speak to it.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. The reason I brought this forward and the timeliness was because it was out of a newspaper article, and it's about people that are the 6,000 people that are on the brink of homelessness or are living in trailers or motorhomes or RVs. And these people are a concern for me as well. And the article came out of a gentleman who's retired, another person who moved here, who's living on a farm, who was going to purchase a house. They've abandoned those plans. Things change. These are people where we've got housing that's going out of the market. We got rents people can't afford, and these are people that have their own little homes that have found a place to stay. And what I'm saying is, just like you Clulet Mayor said, we have to start somewhere. That's what Councillor Thorpe just said in the last motion. We have to start somewhere. So I'm saying, like you Clulet did, this may be one of the options, is they're bringing about temporary use permits for people to be able to accommodate them at this time. What I'm asking for is our staff, who I'm sure will probably contact you, Clulet, or any other municipalities that are looking at this right now, and coming back with options for us to consider about how we can accommodate so many people that may be needing this support, and maybe a change in our bylaws and the way it's written. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just had a question for Councillor Martman. For that, are you talking about allowing RVs on local lots in town, like where if I own a house, I can have an RV and somebody living in it? Or are you looking at specified areas in town?
I was more thinking of staff coming back to us with whatever options may be available, whether it's being able to have it as a secondary accommodation like we now do for carriage houses. Maybe it's some of the farms we have within the city in Nanaimo that are 5-acre farms. Why shouldn't you be able to have a motorhome or an RV? I think that there would have to be, it's complex, everything is complex. There needs to be regulations, there needs to be safety, there needs to be hookups and sewer and water, et cetera, but most people that own motorhomes and RVs and that are all familiar with that. So whether it's allowing permanent residents in some of our campgrounds or RV parks or temporary use permits, I'm not sure what those particular details are, but I'm hopeful that staff will be able to do that little bit of research. I know nothing's little, but and come back to us with what our options are as to how we may be able to support people that have to live. And some people choose to, and some people may have to.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Gurry, could you just read back the motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Worship. So it's that council directs staff to prepare a report on the options available to support permanent RV accommodation.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Through to staff. To Mr. Rudolph, I believe, are you able to highlight what Monday's upcoming session would be touching upon at a high level?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Lindsay would be the best person to speak to that. He's the architect of the session, so I think he can speak to, and maybe we've got some additions to it.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Monday's really, on the housing front, is really two things, is what we're hoping to be is an annual update to the housing strategy and how the implementation of that document's going. And then secondly, to introduce and allow for some discussion around proposed amendments to Schedule G to what we hope will be is encourage more affordable housing in the community.
Sorry, what was that last bit?
To amendments to Schedule G to encourage affordable housing.
Okay. Thanks. One thing I'm just going to say, I'm wondering if, because I do know what it's like to write a staff report, and sometimes they could start small and get quite big, especially at the top of this. All I'm just wondering is it possible to have like 5 minutes of preliminary comments at a GPC like that about considerations, and then if it's something that we want to pursue before we go down a further path, because I know on the surface level it seems like an easy win, but I also know unpacking it is very, very difficult.
Your Worship, I think what we could do for Monday easily would be just a kind of at least a state of the nation of what does the zoning bylaw currently say, because there is actually some areas in town where we do allow permanent residency in recreational vehicles, and we have for many years. And then also unpack for council what our current enforcement policy is around recreational vehicles and permanent occupancy. We could be prepared for that conversation, absolutely.
Thanks. I'm going to leave it to the mover to decide, but I would support just that quick deferral if it could be easily accommodated, and then that decision could be made from there.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following on Councillor Brown's comments, I'd be happy if staff is able to give us some very quick background on this issue on Monday. And maybe some conversation and discussion will stem from that. I'm not prepared to support this motion tonight. We've already heard issues of staff capacity, things that aren't in our work plan, and this might seem simple, but I'm sure it would not end up being a simple topic to delve into. So I can't support this spur-of-the-moment motion here tonight. Again, if we can accommodate some information on Monday, that's great. But that's where I stand.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship. So if there was an appetite with Councillor Martman or another member of council to defer this matter to be discussed after the GPC or at the GPC on Monday, April 26th, rather than this evening, it could be deferred to that meeting. So if there's a mover and a seconder.
Councillor Armstrong, is there a seconder?
So I believe Councillor Martman moved
Armstrong.
that, and then Councillor
Moves Councillor Armstrong, I need a seconder.
Yeah.
Works for me. All those in favor of the motion to defer? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor, thank you very much.